volume.
When you're recognized, we'll double check it then. Okay, it is 5:30. I call to order this special meeting of the State Republican Executive Committee. Good evening, and thank you again for your participation. Before we get started, a brief reminder on procedure for our meeting. This is a virtual meeting, an online meeting, but it's still an SREC meeting, subject to our bylaws, our rules, and Robert's rules. Therefore, just like an in-person meeting, the way to make a motion for consideration by the body is to be recognized by the chair to address the body, make an appropriate motion under the laws of Texas, the rules of the Republican Party of Texas, and Robert's rules, state your motion out loud, receive a second, and have the motion placed before the body by the chair. Calling, emailing, text messaging anybody with your desired motion in advance has no bearing on whether the motion will be heard. This meeting, like the two others we've had over the past 9 days, is an emergency meeting. The only items that can be covered in an emergency meeting are the items that have been noticed. No other item is in order. These are the three items on the agenda: convention briefing, revisit or rescind the location of the state convention, amend Rule 14C per the notice wording change. I hope these reminders are helpful to prevent any misunderstandings this evening. We got a handful of people still to be let in. In the meantime, I see Mr. Morales has his hand raised. Mr. Morales.
Mr. Chairman, Roy Morales, SD 13. If we've already begun, I'd like to make a motion pertaining to the order of tonight's agenda items. I'd like to move up the latter one, allowing the Prairie State Convention Committee to meet online.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, if you will. We're gonna hold on that just for a moment till we go ahead and call the roll so that we've established our quorum, and then that'll be the first order of business. So
Point of order.
yes, ma'am.
Let me get my camera. We haven't even been called to order. We haven't said our pledges. We haven't said.
Actually, yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I just
so what
said.
I'm-
I said
so what
I
I'm
actually,
saying-
ma'am.
So what I'm
If-
saying,
Ma'am, I actually did call us to order. Your statement was not true. I had just called us to order. But you're right, we haven't done the ceremonial things. We haven't done the pledges. So, but I did recognize Mr. Morales, so we will hold on this.
but you're
to be the first
recognizing
order of
him-
business after we do the ceremonial items and we announce.
But
So,
but regular order is that you wait until you say the pledges, and then in that agenda item, then you can make those motions. But you can't everybody can't have their hands up making motions before the meeting has technically even started.
actually,
so-
the meeting began when I called it to order. And
Think
and-
about any SREC meeting that we're meeting in person,
It's
and
not-
that has never happened before.
Ms. Thomas, you're being deleterious, please. Let's move on to the pledges.
I don't
And
think
prayer.
that is correct.
And thank you for your opinion. Thank you. Let's do the ceremony. If I could have Chaplain Tabor, please lead us in the invocation, after which I will lead us in the pledges. Chaplain Tabor, would you please lead us in the invocation?
Let us pray.
God, we come before you today, and we are so grateful for you, that in the midst of all that we are seeing happen in our world, we have a relationship with you, which gives us perspective. It gives us the ability to know that we can trust you and we can rely upon you. And so, God, we in this moment declare our need for you. Your word says in John 15 that apart from you, we can do nothing. And so tonight, God, we submit ourselves to you. We ask for your will to be done. We ask for your direction. We ask for your guidance. God, I pray for unity. I pray for effective communication. I pray for partnership and wisdom and even reconciliation in the conversation that we have tonight, Father. I pray for our leaders that you would give them wisdom and direction to know how to manage through this situation. And ultimately, God, we put our trust in you. So we ask tonight, God, for your hand to be at work. We ask for there to be peace. We ask for there to be joy, for the fruit of the Spirit to be evident in this place tonight. And we trust you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Now, if you'll join me in the pledge to the United States flag. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United
United States of America
and
and to the republic
for which it
for which it
stands,
stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And then the Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I
I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God,
one
one
and indivisible.
indivisible.
Wonderful. Thank you. And so let me see. The next order of business would be to establish a roll. Without objection, I appoint David Halverson, Dawn Elliott, and Marion Knowlton to a proxy committee with David Halverson as chair. Hearing no objection, proxy committee is appointed. Given the limitations of electronic meeting, feel free to conduct your business via chat or text as necessary. The roll call will now come, including myself and Vice Chair Alma Jackson. There are 64 members of the SREC. The proxy committee, please go ahead and begin your work while our Secretary Josh Flynn calls the roll. Josh, please call the roll.
James Dickey,
Present?
Alma Jackson,
Present.
Tony Ann DeShiel, Dr. Robert Armstrong.
I'm
Here.
present. Sorry, Tony Ann's here.
I got you.
Thanks.
Dr. Robert Armstrong,
Here.
Chris Howell,
Here.
Nelda Epps,
Here.
Larry Hicks,
Here.
Wade Emmert,
Present.
Art Martinez de Vera, Corey Tabor,
Present.
Sue Evenwell,
Here.
Robert Kessig,
Here.
Jerry Fisher,
Here.
Jason Ross,
Here.
Judy Parada,
Here.
David Covey,
Here.
Allison Winter, proxy Daniel Ur,
Here.
Walter West,
Right here.
Nita Davidson,
Here.
Mike McCloskey,
Here.
Don McDonald,
Here.
Chris McDonald,
Present.
Mark Ramsey,
Here.
Terry Leo,
Here.
Susan Fisher,
Here.
Chuck Branch,
Present.
Ann Gebhardt,
Here.
Steve Atwell,
Here.
Susan Wright,
Here.
Warren Norred,
Here.
Tanya Robertson,
Here.
JT Edwards,
Here. Fixing my camera.
Jill Glover,
Here.
David Halverson,
Here.
Don Elliott,
Here.
Roy Morales,
Present.
Jan Duncan,
Here.
Fernando Trevino,
Here.
Gail Stannard,
Present.
Virgil Cruz,
Here.
Susan Fountain,
Here.
Randall Dunning,
Here.
Kathleen Wall, Marvin Cleed,
Here.
Edie Sinclair,
Here.
David Luther,
Present.
Marion Knowlton,
Here.
Robert Casillas, Hannah Scott,
Here.
Sam Dalton,
Here.
Carla Sisk,
Present.
Terry Harper,
Here.
Ashley Sellers, probably proxy and Heck,
Amy Headkey here.
Trip Bryant,
Here.
Leslie Thompson,
Here,
Pastor Stephen Broden,
Present.
Summer Wise,
Here.
Jack Barcroft, proxy Thomas Munn,
Here.
Linda Kinney,
Here.
Mark DeRazio,
Here.
Marion Stanko, Michael Rain,
Here. I'm here.
yes, Morgan Graham,
Present.
James Zavaleta,
Here.
Neva Henney,
She's here.
Drew Bullard,
Here.
Barbara Carrasco,
Here.
Mark Dunham,
Here.
Leon Starnes,
Here.
Britton Brooks,
Here.
Rhonda Lacey,
Present.
Tom Roller.
Here.
Chairman, we have a quorum.
Mr. Secretary.
Thank you very
Yes, sir.
much. Mr. Casillas wanted to indicate that he is here as well. If you and Mr. Halverson, Mrs. Robertson said she was going to send you an indication that she'll need a proxy form for later tonight.
Okay.
And Mr. Covey is here as well. If Mr. Halverson, do you have a report? I know it's quick.
Be just a moment.
Understood?
Mr. Chairman, point of order, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Could we have the update on what's going on with the lawsuit so we know what's happening before we get into the business, please, sir? Is that
Actually,
possible?
That's actually the first item on the agenda, so we'll get to it right as we start the agenda. So
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
you're welcome. And that, for future reference, that's not actually a point of order. That was a point of information. That was let's see if we could. Mr. Secretary, do you have a count of how many you have already? Because I'm seeing 87 participants and we've got 64 members of the SREC. I know we have a handful of staff and we have a handful of officers as well. I would ask anybody who's on, who is not staff or officers, please follow along on YouTube or Facebook. TexasGOP.me/YouTube is the easiest way to get there. If you would, and we are going to mute to avoid that kind of background noise. So when you are recognized, you'll be unmuted. So we'll take care of that. We have the first order of business. We already had. We already have the motion to flip the order of items number 2 and 3 on the agenda. Yeah, sorry. We do have We do also have some representatives from auxiliaries in as well. And of course, they do have the right to be present as well. So I know I saw at least a couple of those. So, all right. So we have a motion on flipping the order. Again, the 3 items for tonight: convention briefing, revisit or rescind the location of the state convention, and amend Rule 14C. And the motion on the floor is to flip the order of the last 2 items. Mr. Duncan, do you have, actually, you know what? I want to change up the way we're doing symbols this time. If you'd like to speak in favor of the motion on the floor, click the yes checkbox, the green check. If you want to speak opposed to the motion on the floor, click the red no. If you want to, if you actually have a point of order, then click the go slower. And if you if you have a point of information, click the go faster. So let's see. So let's go to, let's see. So, so I see 1 in favor, 2 opposed, 1 with a point of order. So let's see who that is. On the point of order would be Mr. West. Mr. West.
Yes, sir. I'd like to appeal the decision on Miss Leslie's, Miss Thomas's motion. You hadn't let everybody in through the door yet, or in through your meeting room yet, and we hadn't called roll, so we didn't know who was present. They weren't there.
Well, it is true we had not called roll. I had called the meeting to order, and it was after the start time. But absolutely, so we've got a motion to appeal the ruling of the chair that the motion was in order. Let's see, for that, let's do.
Actually, I'm curious what believes the remedy is at this point.
Yeah. Good.
I don't believe it's timely.
Okay. So, I mean, Mr. West, if no, okay. So therefore, we will move forward with the vote on whether or not to change the order. All right. So for this, go ahead and enter your vote in the chat. And yes, if you are in favor of the order change, and no, if you are not in favor of the order change. I see a point of order, but we're in the middle of the vote, so I'll wait and we'll deal with that afterwards. Okay. So a yes for the order of agenda change, a no if you're opposed to the order of agenda change and want to leave it in the order as noticed. Okay, we're going to close the votes in 3, 2, 1. And the motion passes. It's yeah. All right, motion passes. So the order has been changed. Now Mr. Rain is letting in, and Miss Duncan. Here, let's see if we've got, let me ask you to unmute here. There you go.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the modified MacGyver rule that we had on the last session, 5 for, 5 against, 3 minutes each. Again, we've got a lot to accomplish tonight, and I think that just really helped us keep things moving along. It doesn't mean people can't still, ask questions as needed, but I would like to make that motion. Thank you.
Okay, so the motion for the modified MacGyver rule, 5 in favor, 5 opposed, ending when the alternating is done. We've got a second for Mr. McCloskey. All right, you know what? For the vote, I will see about changing the chat and see if we can do that. Let's see. All right, let's give that a shot. So we are in, there's a motion to pass by unanimous consent. Is there any objection? Without objection, the motion passed. Oh, we have an objection? Okay, without objection, the motion passes. Okay, now the chat is on for votes. If you would restrict the use of the chats to votes. Oh, you did object, Mr. Ramsey. Okay, never mind. Then in that case, we are going to take the vote. Then let's go ahead and take the vote in chat. Just vote yes or no if you're in favor of the motion as seconded. Okay, the motion passes. We have the modified MacGyver rule, and we will end the use of the chat since there were members who did not understand. Please use the chat only to vote. I thought it was pretty clear there, but that's okay. Mr. Covey. Let's make sure you, let's ask you to unmute there. Mr. Covey.
I was actually going to speak to a different order.
Okay, great. I'll leave you up. Mr. Dunham.
I also wish to speak to a different item, sir.
Great. Okay, then this seems like a good time to move on to the next item in the briefing. So, first of all, let me start with a brief update for everyone. We had several hundred join us Tuesday night for a convention town hall update, and hundreds more who joined us Wednesday night for the new delegate training. On that new delegate training, I shared that we had received a letter from the Houston First Corporation with notice to cancel our convention. Then Thursday morning, we filed suit against the Houston First Corporation, City of Houston, and Mayor Sylvester Turner, requesting an injunction and a temporary restraining order on their actions with the objective of moving forward with our convention in person beginning Monday. The hearing was held Thursday afternoon, and not surprisingly, our request was denied in the liberal Harris County District Court. We immediately appealed to the Texas Supreme Court. As is clear from the arguments of the city's attorneys to the local court, the cancellation of our contract was a purely political play from Mayor Turner. He could have canceled at any time. We have been working with his team for months now on logistics and accommodating pandemic guidelines and recommendations. He chose the timing, and we are fighting back against this Democrat shutdown of Texas conservatives. Turner is holding Texas Republicans to a different standard from anyone else, and we are not giving up. A week ago, the State Republican Executive Committee voted overwhelmingly to hold an in-person convention in Houston at the George R. Brown Convention Center, and we are fighting tooth and nail against this latest attack in a long, sad history of Democrat voter suppression. The SREC voted just this Sunday night to have a contingency plan taking the convention activities online should the convention center be unavailable. But any other planning that is occurring is not official convention activities. Convention activities for us are those that are duly voted on by this body. If we have to go online, safe local gatherings absolutely can maybe organized so that while convention business and electronic voting is being conducted with online systems, we could enjoy being with fellow delegates. As a reminder about hotel rooms, should we get into a situation where you need to cancel hotel rooms, the convention hotels have a 24 to 48 hour cancellation notice. And in fact, the Marriott Marquis has a policy so that if we have to cancel because of the unavailability of the convention room, all of those rooms will be refunded. Sorry. All of those hotel rooms will be refunded without exception, regardless of the policy and the date. Of course, if you're booked at the Four Seasons and you need to cancel today, please email Katie at kshrkman@michaelbest.com. Again, that's kshrkman@michaelbest.com. As announced on our convention town hall this week, the convention schedule has been shortened to accommodate these unusual circumstances. We've removed some of our beloved pageantry, the speeches from the elected officials, some of the fun interludes, to keep the critical business of our convention this year, which the penultimate moment will be electing our electors to cast Texas's 38 electoral college votes for President Donald J. Trump. If we must move to our online contingency plan, the schedule will remain intact and is available at the revised convention schedule at texasgop.org/2020-state-convention. We have taken the steps necessary to execute agreements to have our backup plan. Tonight, we will see about the next changes and we will respond as necessary to the legal update and the medical situation. Wade, if you are on, if you would please give an update about the latest in the legal situation. And I will make sure that you are able to address the body. And Warren as well. We got 85 folks here, so looking for Wade. There we go. You'll need to unmute yourself. There we go.
Very good. Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. My name is Wade Emmerich. I'm general counsel for the party. I'm your lawyer, in other words. I will give you a brief update about where we are. I would just say at the very beginning that because this is being live streamed, and no doubt the media is listening in, and most likely the respondents or lawyers for the respondents are listening in, I will be limited in some ways or in many ways of things we can discuss. But I'll give you a quick update, which in some ways will mimic what the chairman said, but also give you some expectations for the future and timing. Let me say first that this body voted overwhelmingly last week to proceed with an in-person convention. When the mayor canceled our contract, the chairman gave me very specific directions to defend your decision to have the meeting in person. The legal strategy, the focus, the ways we went about protecting that rights is, of course, my responsibility as general counsel for the party. Now, I didn't make those decisions all by myself. We brought in other lawyers to help us with that, But ultimately, the legal strategy is mine. And the strategy, the goal of the strategy was to get our message in front of a court as quickly as possible so that we could have an opportunity to have the contract enforced. A hearing in the middle of our convention doesn't do us much good. A hearing after the convention is over does not do us much good. So I made the decision to file the petition in the court we filed in so that we could get a hearing as quickly as possible. And so far, that's borne out to be the case. We had a hearing on Thursday afternoon. Thankfully, it was denied quickly so that we could petition to the Supreme Court. Briefing was due by the respondents today by 5. We don't know how long it will take for the Supreme Court to rule. Hopefully, it would be Monday morning, Monday afternoon. That is something we just don't know. But it is my belief then, and it's my belief now, that this was and is the best opportunity to get the relief we need if that relief is going to come. So with that said, we don't know anything yet. The decision will be made by the Supreme Court. Hopefully we'll hear on Monday, and we can make decisions following that ruling. But as it stands, Mr. Chairman, we are waiting for the Supreme Court to rule. The briefings have been filed. We will likely file a reply brief later tonight, and then the court will rule at the court's hopefully first available opportunity.
Thank you very much. And yes, we should all be grateful to have such incredible general counsel and other attorneys to help with all of this significant effort, including absolutely our own Warren Nord. Very, very proud to have him involved as well. I would also appreciate if Dr. Armstrong would speak. Some of the folks have, some of the opposition has said that we are fighting for an in-person effort that because we do not take seriously the threat of coronavirus, its characteristics. And Dr. Armstrong and I have had multiple conversations about that, and I would appreciate it, Dr. Armstrong.
Yeah, I'll do it later.
Speak to that.
Yes. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. So I'll tell you, so we actually have worked very hard with to make a very safe manner.
There, I don't know if it was just me, but you were breaking up pretty bad right there. Could you try one more time? Shoot. Okay, well, hopefully he can get a little better. There we go.
Is that better?
That's much better.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. So yeah, so we had a meeting with the George R. Brown last week and discussing how we could have a safe convention in the setting of this pandemic. And we thought that everybody was on board. We set up thermal scanners. So everyone coming into the convention center would have a thermal scan. We set up reduced entryways and exits to the convention center. We actually had some folks actually decided that they would sponsor masks for everyone coming in and out of the convention center. We know the governor's order requires that all the restaurants require that we wear masks. You know, we really were going to have temperature checks with those thermal scanners. You know, we had, if someone had a temperature over 100.4, we're actually going to have, you know, EMS set up, and I was going to be available, and other physicians were going to be available to make sure that we check those folks out, make sure they were okay. I actually have arranged in Houston a friend who has a clinic who actually was willing to see patients if they exhibited any kind of symptoms of COVID-19. And so we really had a pretty comprehensive plan in place, you know, where we were going to have stuff available on site and then make sure that we were screening people as well as any hospital has been screening, you know, medical people as they come in. And so, and as of last week, it's kind of ironic that George R. Brown seemed to be on board with all of that. And so they were in agreement. They thought the plan was, in fact, it was my first meeting with them. And I was actually surprised. I came into the meeting expecting some pushback on their part, but I was actually surprised. They were very pleased with how things were going and looking forward to having the convention. And that all certainly changed, you know, sometime this past week. And so we really have worked hard at trying to have a very safe convention. I think that it certainly is possible. It's going to require us being very, very responsible and being very open to protecting our neighbors. But I think, you know, we're Republicans and we take individual responsibility very seriously. We're planning on doing that. I was excited about the opportunity to be an example of how we can show not only the United States, but the world, because this has made certainly national news. I've seen it on CNN and other outlets, but I was excited about the opportunity to be able to show the world how we can put on a large event indoors and do it the right way and not have any illnesses coming out of it. But obviously the mayor sought to kill that. And so it's very unfortunate, but I think that, you know, if the Supreme Court rules in our favor and rules quickly in our favor, I think that, you know, we have an opportunity to really showcase what we can do. We can even in a manner of speaking, play on their field and still come out being very responsible and looking very good politically, while at the same time protecting the health of the city, the county, and our delegates. And so I'm still excited for that opportunity. We've got a safe convention planned, and so I look forward to seeing y'all in Houston this week.
Thank you very much. Excuse me, Mr. McCloskey had a point of information. Mr. McCloskey, I'll unmute you here. Let's see if you will unmute yourself, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me now?
I can.
Michael McCloskey, Senate District 5. I have several parts of a question that I need to ask, and I would expect that the answer would need to come from legal counsel. According to the order that came out of the district court in Harris County, there is an evidentiary hearing that I see scheduled for 9:30 a.m. on Monday. Also, in consulting with another attorney who practices there, he said that there's not been a filing in the Harris County Clerk's office for the appeal to go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court website does not show an appeal there as well. And then the other part of my question is, even if the party prevails in their suit Monday or Tuesday, or whenever that might be, does that necessarily dictate that the convention facility would need to have staffing and other things that we would need for our convention to be provided for us?
So the relief we have asked for is specific performance of the contract. That's the whole contract and all the provisions of the contract. That's what we have asked for. And I don't know who that legal mind is who didn't know that we in fact are already having counter filings received by the Supreme Court. In fact, those have been received and I've been receiving copies of them. So if they don't, whoever that is, if they don't even know that our case is already there, they could do a search online and find that it's there.
There is an evidentiary hearing on Monday, is that correct?
There is also in district court in Houston, an evidentiary hearing in Houston also. That does not preclude us from already being at the Texas Supreme Court. And in fact, we are.
Okay, and the last part of the question was if even if they rule in our favor, does that necessarily require the George R. Brown or the Houston One Corporation to provide the staffing and all the other things we need for the convention?
I'm sorry, I didn't translate what I was saying. When I said our request is for specific performance of the contract, that means our request is that the judge tells them they do what they were supposed to do under the contract. That is a complete request, including all of the other stuff that you mentioned and a whole lot more. Sorry, I didn't explain that to you. That was an assumption on my part. My bad. Okay, now to Mr. Covey. Let's see, Mr. Covey, if you would unmute, please.
Chairman, still speaking to another item.
Okay, great. All right, so let's see. That brings us to Ms. Wise. Ms. Wise, let's see, there we go. Ms. Wise.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. Summer Wise, SD 24. I move to amend Rule 14C according to the agenda.
Okay, according to the notice that was provided.
Yeah, the notice that was provided.
Okay. Brandon, if you would, go ahead and share your screen and bring up the Rule 14C notice that was provided. Is there a second? Somebody can chat me the second if they would like. I'll let you know. Let's see, who do we? Okay, Mr. Edwards seconded, and my apologies, Mr. Ross. If you don't mind, Mr. Ross, I'll come back to you in a little bit. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Would you care to speak to your motion, Ms. Wise?
Sure, I'll speak to it. So this rule amendment would enable temporary committee chairmen for the state convention to have the option to conduct their meetings virtually if needed and at their discretion. So as one of the temporary committee chairmen, I can tell you that there might be a need for this. We're noticing that a lot of our committee appointees who are serving with us either can't be there in person or we're starting to see some issues there. And I think we'd have better representation if we might be able to allow those folks to join the committee meetings online. Also, some of the committee meetings are starting as early as Monday, and we may not have a court decision by then. It's a lot easier to go from online to in person if we need to, versus in person to online. So that's one thing to consider. Third, especially for credentials committee, I think conducting our meeting virtually will allow by default for testimony to be received virtually from those who have credentials issues that they'd like to bring before our committee. And instead of them trekking all the way down to Houston, only to potentially be let down if, unfortunately, we might have to deny their credentials and then go back home, they can testify before us online and, not have to travel in order to meet with us. So I know we have the ability to opt for online testimony if needed as well, but I like this umbrella rule amendment that just takes care of it all in one. And I think given our circumstances this time, this would be beneficial to us to have this option. Nothing that's required, but I think it would be good to have it in place should the need arise for all of the temporary committees.
Thank you. All right, so now we've got actually a couple of points of information and order. So I'm going to get to those. First of all, while I am doing that, Brandon, please zoom in on that page so that the text is a whole lot easier for people to read in the screen share. And I will take these in order. Mr. Ross, you have a point of information. Oh, sorry. Let's have you address the body, please.
Thank you. Yes, my point of information was I was wondering what the vote tallies were for those first two votes.
In terms of switching the agenda order, it was about 16 to 23. It wasn't a total count of the members by any means, but it was the other way around. It was in favor. 16 against, 23 in favor. and the MacGyver rule one, that one was overwhelming in favor. I think there were about 14 against.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet. And we will, we'll do that. Let's see. All right. So next, thank you, Mr. Ross. That brings us to, let's see, Mr. Ross, I'm going to, if you would clear your indicator there. Thank you, Mr. Ross. Mr. McDonald, you have a point of order. Let's see if you can, if you would. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Chris McDonald, SD6, point of order regarding the MacGyver rule vote. I tallied that it was 20 no and 16 against, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, you said 20 no and 16 against, so there were none in favor?
Correct. The MacGyver rule failed by my count in chat.
Oh, you meant 20.
There were 20 no's and 16 yeses, sir. The MacGyver rule failed.
Okay, let's go see.
It's also a 2/3 vote, Mr. Chairman.
Is it a 2/3 vote? Okay. Well, you know what? Then let's do a record vote on that MacGyver vote. Mr. Secretary, would you go ahead? We will go ahead and do.
Mr.
Pardon?
Chairman,
Yeah.
without objection.
Without objection, we'll do a record vote.
I'll confirm it a roll call vote or a record vote.
Sorry. Roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So without objection, oh, I have an objection. Ms. Thomas objects. So we can have a vote on whether or not to have.
Mr. Chairman, we're in the middle of a main motion.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So it's actually that, hence the objection. Okay. All right. So therefore, because that question on the vote has been challenged and we are in the middle of this debate, the debate on this will not follow per the modified MacGyver rule. So it'll just be debate. So we are on this and that has been moved. So we will now continue through any points of order or points of information. And I see I've still got couple more of each. Mr. McDonald, if you could let your point of order down, then since I just recognized you, I'll move on to Mr. Halverson. You have a point of order. Mr. Halverson?
Yes. Mr. Chairman, were you interested in pursuing the proxy report?
Yes, please.
Okay. We had 3 proxies and we have one coming up at 7 for Mrs. Robertson in SD 11. I don't have that one fully in my possession yet, but our committee looked at 3 proxies for SD 24 for Mr. Barcroft, proxy for Thomas Munn. We have also a proxy for Ms. Winter in SD 4, Daniel Ure, and we also have a proxy for Ashley Sellers in SD 22 for Amy Hedke. And all 3 of those look to be in order and our committee has agreed.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, so the next, Mr. Dunning, you have a point of information?
Okay, and now let me unmute. The question I have is on when we're doing the votes on the chat. The first time I voted, I did not see any other votes rolling across, and my default came up to send the vote message to the chairman.
Correct.
Which of the 4 or 5 options that are on that should we have selected for these votes?
Yeah, we tried a couple of different ways to do those votes, and I think instead we will just do roll call or record votes depending on the choice of the body from now on these. So,
okay, thank you very much, sir.
You bet. So let's see what we have now. Mr. Bryant, you have a point of order. Oh, sorry. There we go. Ah, there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes. You
Yes.
have a point of
Earlier,
order?
my inquiry is earlier, I tried to make an interrupting motion by raising a point of inquiry, asking about the agenda, the order of the agenda. And I was unable to speak because you obviously had the system muted. Do we have any recommendations that we can prevent that from happening again? Because I feel that the body should be able to make those necessary interrupting motions.
Okay, so that did not actually sound like a point of information, but or point of order. Mr. DeRazio, you have a point of information? Sorry, excuse me. Mr. DeRazio.
Okay, whenever the motion was made on the MacGyver rule, it was 5-4, 5 against. And there was something after the motion that I did not hear, a time limit of 3 minutes each. Is that correct?
That was the motion. We'll come back to that later. Right now, we are on this motion to remove the limitation of only applying to county and senatorial district meetings. The rule 14C as noticed. Thank you. All right, so let's see. We've got one more of each. Let me go through here. We have Mrs. Stannard. You have a point of order? No, it's down. Mrs. Fountain, you have a point of order.
No, sir, not at this time.
Great, thank you. Okay, then to that end, Ms. Glover, you have a point of information.
Mr. Chair, Jill Glover, SD12, we seem to be having some muting difficulties. I wasn't able to hear Mr. Bryant's point
Yeah,
of
his sound came across very, very low at the end. He was obviously still speaking. I could still hear him, but only barely. You're right.
Could you please repeat that? It seems like we've all been muted, and so we're not able to react quickly or speak.
Well, no, clearly you're not muted. You just address the body as a
because you just sir, you just unmuted me. You have all of us on mute, and then you're unmuting us as we speak. That's why there's such a long delay.
Just like in an in-person meeting, you have the microphone or you do not, and those who have the microphone are allowed to address the body. And that's really, if I may remind everybody, as I said at the beginning of this is just like an in-person meeting. You don't just address the body at will. You get the microphone, you get recognized, and then you address the body.
But Mr. Chairman, the perception, Mr. Chairman, is that no one has anything to say or wishes to speak because the people watching us, our delegates watching us, can't see. If we were in person, they could see us wave our hand or try to speak. And in this format, with you having all of us muted, we're not able to let you know that we wish to speak. And we have to rely on you looking at the screen.
And each other, you can all see the screen. Thank you.
Could you please let Ms.
We've got, thank you for your point of information. Now,
could you please let Mr. Bryant restate his point of information so we can hear?
If he asks for recognition again and gets microphone again, yes. Mr. Ramsey? Mr. Ramsey?
There we go.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a point of information, and if the answer is yes, then I'd like to make a short motion that I think will speed things up. Are we currently operating under the MacGyver rule?
No,
We are not.
we
Okay.
are not.
Okay, thank you.
And we still have some more points of order and inquiry. Let's see, Mr. Ramsey, if you'll remove your point of inquiry. Ms. Glover, if you will remove your point of inquiry. Mr. Dunning, you have a point of inquiry. Mr. Dunning.
Okay, I just got the unmute flag. It's very slow. The question I have is, under this current motion, does this signal anyone that we are submitting to a digital convention? Or is this still allow us to say that we are still moving forward with a in-person convention, but just dealing with the problems due to the delays in the courts?
Mr. Norad, is that something we can or should address online? And if so, would you? I'm looking to see if I can find you in there. There we go. Mr. Norr.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question was, would passing this that allows the temporary committees to have the option to meet online, as the Senate District and County Conventions all had the right to, the ability to do if necessary, would that in some way cause complications or signal anything to the court about the importance or necessity of having the convention in person?
And it should not. In the real world, things often have an impact that should not. It would be seized upon by people who want to say, see, they can do it, and therefore you should force them to do it that way. And then people on our side would say, look, the fact that we're doing it in our committees where you have a reasonable number of people that are trying to work together should not have any impact. And so people would say these things. Would it make a real impact? It shouldn't, but you know, that's as close as I can get, man. Anybody who wants to have it full bore virtual is going to seize on anything that we do that allows or recognizes the ability for things to be done virtually as proof positive that we can have thousands of people online virtually. And the rest of us will say, no, it really doesn't mean that at all. But whatever you want to exaggerate, you can.
Thanks,
That's the Weasley attorney answer. That's the best I can do.
Understood. Mr. Bryant, you had a point of inquiry. Mr. Bryant. Okay, Mr. Bryant appears to be having some technological challenge. No, Mr. Bryan, I'm sorry, we cannot hear you. Okay, while we wait for that, Mr. Morales.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Roy Morales, SD 13. Point of information last week we voted for an in-person convention. Is the Marriott Marquis considered part of the George R. Brown facility? And if so, why are we doing this if we already voted on an in-person convention?
That actually sounds like more like a comment against. So we're not doing the MacGyver rule, but that would be.
But it was a question, sir. Still a question, is the Marriott Marquis part of the George R. Brown facility
So,
in concept?
yeah, probably not technically, but it would be purely ministerial to say, that the chair of the committees move the, open the committee and then move the location to across the street.
Well, maybe the better question, sir, is the Marriott Marquis available to provide the services to the temporary committees?
It is. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that's point of information. Now we got 3 more points of order. We'll handle these. Mrs. Robertson. There we go, Mrs. Robertson.
Okay, I'm trying to click the buttons.
We got you.
Mine is a point of information. That's the faster button, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Point of information.
Okay. Mine kind of piggybacks on Committeeman Morales's question because we have committee members coming in tomorrow and early Monday morning for these committee meetings that have hotel reservations. So I guess the answer that you had for Committeeman Morales should play into this rule change, I'm hoping.
As of right now, we have not canceled. We expect victory at the Texas Supreme Court. We are moving forward as this body has directed with an in-person convention at the George R. Brown Center and the Marriott Marquis.
Gotcha. Thank you, sir.
Okay, let's see. If you would remove that button, please, ma'am. And that brings us to Carla Sisk's point of information.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me now?
I can, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So that was part of my question. If the committees, if they do not allow us because of the Supreme Court or because of the lawsuit, I'm sorry, to start the committees inside the convention center, instead of this, could we not amend this to say that we're going to move those to the Marriott so they could move in person? Would that be in order, sir?
It's not necessary. It'd be purely ministerial. The rule does not say, and the call did not say inside the George R. Brown. It said at the George R. Brown. And the mayor has graciously told us it's perfectly fine for thousands of people to be out in front of the George R. Brown Center, just not inside. So.
But what about in the Marriott? In other words, the Marriott's got to have meeting rooms.
Right.
That handle the
Yeah.
committee.
Sorry, you misunderstood my comment.
I'm sorry. Okay.
We don't have to make a change to the rule in order to move the committees from the George R. Brown to the Marriott.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Be a purely ministerial function of the chair of the committee to walk in front of the George R. Brown Center and say, I adjourn to meeting over there. And then the committee could meet in the room that we have available at the Marriott Marquis.
Okay, so then if we enact this rule, does that make them automatically go online?
If you make this change, they would have the option of going online.
The option. But then if we do the option, then when would it be decided which way to go? I'm sorry, sir, we just have so many people that don't know whether to pack and drive to Houston tomorrow. And we're all trying to help our people know what to do. And we're all looking for clarification, sir.
I understand, and it's up to you guys to provide that clarification. And that is part of what this debate and discussion is about. So as of, let's see, as we've got next, oh, sorry, Mr. McDonald, do you have a point of order?
No, sir, I clicked the wrong button. I was looking for a point of information. I'm sorry, I'll get back in line. Which one do I need to click?
Oh, that's fine. It would be the faster button. Why don't you go ahead and address it?
It's a point of information. Ken Paxton just filed a brief against us with the court stating the state has a strong interest in correct application of the court's mandamus authority because relators have not properly invoked that authority. the view of the state is that the petition should be denied. With that in mind, can you provide any guidance?
No, I'm not a lawyer and I don't play one. We have talked that over with council and we are proceeding, and that's why, and we were fully aware of that when you received your update from the general counsel. We had already received that and already reviewed it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You bet. That brings us to Mr. Bryant.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes. Hey, great audio. There we go.
Can we bring clarification or inquiry about us being able to truly make interrupting motions? And can we bring clarification as to what to push? Because obviously I hit the wrong one again. Can we just put that on the record of what?
Yeah, I will gladly. I mean, this has all been live streamed and recorded, but I will gladly say it again. If you want to speak in favor of the motion, which so far only the mover has been able to speak in favor of the motion, you click the green yes button. If you want to speak opposed, you click the red X. If you have a point of order, and there apparently is someone who already does again, if you have a point of order, you click on the go slower. If you have a point of information, you click on the go faster. And you will see that in the participants list, you will see it indicated beside your name. So for example, Mr. Kessig is showing a red X in his name. You can tell that he's waiting patiently to speak against the motion.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. However, when the first vote that we took was to change the agenda order, and I was trying to, ask a question in regards to that motion so that we could bring it up for debate. We were never given an option to debate that motion because we were muted.
Yeah, don't recall, but that was that.
Well,
this time, that is obviously we are having plenty of debate. And your question, that one is long past. Mr. McCloskey, you have a point of information. Mr. McCloskey, do you have a fresh point of information, or is that from leftover? There you go. No, Mr. Okay, that's gone.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I can.
Senate District 5. Okay, we're at 6:37 p.m. on Saturday night.
Yes.
The committees are scheduled to start at 11 a.m. on Monday.
Yes.
Do I understand at this point, and we don't know, we'll have a ruling from the Texas Supreme Court by 11 a.m. on Monday. Do I understand at this point we do not have an alternate location for our committee members to physically go to Houston to meet at 11 a.m. on Monday?
You would be mistaken.
There is an arrangement?
That is not germane. We already have said we have rooms at the Marriott Marquis. Anyone, we can move forward if you do not pass this motion. The motion is on the floor, though, as to whether or not to pass this motion. So please stick to whether or not to pass this motion. Ms. Knowlton, you have a point of inquiry about whether or not to pass this motion. Now let's try that again. Mrs. Knowlton.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Here you go. Yes.
Okay. So, Mary Knowlton, SD19. There are those who may have been trying to travel to Houston tomorrow or Monday morning, who have canceled reservations, not having information that we're discussing this evening. In the event that we proceed with in-person meetings for these conventions, will room blocks be opened up for these folks to reinstate their reservations?
The room blocks are open right now.
Okay. So that anyone who cancels can get a room back at the same rate.
If it's available.
Thank you.
Point of information, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, Mr. Dunham, we had 3 other points of information still ahead of you. Sooner or later, we'll get to actually debating the motion. Mr. Rain, you have a point of information.
Mr. Chairman, I have a point of information. First of all, I need to object to the format for green check for speaking in favor, red X for speaking against, slower for a point of order, and go faster for a point of information. What's lacking is the ability to make a motion to amend if necessary, or an intervening motion, or even a motion to call the question. Some of those basic parliamentary procedures that we've been able to exercise throughout these other Zoom online meetings. And so I object, and I'd like some clarification. If we want to make a motion to amend, which one of these silly symbols do we need to check, or button do we push? If we want to make a motion to call the question, what do we push? How do we get that before before the chair and before the body?
Well, that would be a raised hand, but as you know, a motion to amend does not take priority over anybody else who is already in line to speak. So right now we are taking the interrupting motions, and then we'll take people in order that they indicated. And so it would be a little while. Thank you. Okay, I believe Mr. Rain was the last interrupting motion. So that brings us now to speaking in favor and against. And according to my recollection,
Mr. Chairman, Mark Dunham, SB 29, I had a point of information.
But you didn't have.
That's because my hand is up, and if I push one of your other buttons, I lose my hand up.
Yeah, but actually, hang on. In order of hand up, Mr. Covey. Mr. Covey, are you looking to speak to this?
No, sir. On
Okay,
another.
great. Then Mr. Dunham, go right ahead.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. In light that it seems that 2/3 of the delegates across the state want an in-person convention, have any of the alternate locations recommended to you, the staff and members of this body, like College Station or even more recently Montgomery County, been looked at when it would be more politically favorable in a friendly environment?
That is not germane on this item. That will be germane on the next one. So we'll take that then. Thank you. Okay, now to Mr. Kessig. No, Mr. Kessig changed his mind, does not want to speak against. Let's go to Mr. Morales.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm speaking against this and like to make amendment to strike this, since we've already agreed to meet in person as committees, and we have the availability of the Marriott. Nobody has to change hotel rooms. People can get in their cars and start driving, and we owe this to our delegates. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And striking it would be out of order. All you have to do is vote against it. Okay, so next to Mr. Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, for one, want to see us meet in person. I have committee members from the Rules Committee who desperately need to know what they need to do and with respect to getting in cars and coming to Houston. Still, you know, whether we're at the George R. Brown or the Marriott, that is my personal preference. I feel like the in-person collaboration is needed. However, other committees may need that flexibility, and given the way that things are moving so quickly, having that flexibility to meet online explicit in the rule, I think would be a benefit, even though I am hoping that we are still able to do in-person committee meetings. The need for that collaboration is paramount. If we lose that in-person collaboration, we lose a lot. But the option of virtual for other committees, and given the quickness with which this is moving, we need to preserve that option. And I would urge a vote for the amendment to 14C. Thank you.
Okay, let's see, Mrs. Duncan.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I rise to speak in favor of this. The reason being, there's no reason, as my colleague Virgil said, that you can't still meet in person. This just gives the ability for.
Sorry, as y'all can hear, I have unmuted folks, and unfortunately, people are not being careful about making sure they're muted when they're not addressing the body. Please do that. Back to you, Ms. Duncan. My apologies for the
That's
interruption.
okay. This just gives the ability for the committee chairs to be able to move things forward in a faster way. I know there are some members who have been appointed to these committees that, like, we had one in our district who had to back out from the ledge priorities. Now, he let us know in time that we could replace him, but had he known that he could have possibly been online with it and still done his due diligence, he would have stayed on the committee rather than dropping off. And so I know that on credentials, there are some that are asking to be able to be online. And it doesn't mean that the delegates can't still be there in Houston. There can be rooms set up. There's no reason not to allow it to be both ways. So I speak in favor and hope that you will vote for this.
Thank you. Mrs. Wall. You are next up. If you can unmute. Okay, Mr. Dunning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Randy Dunning, SD16. I rise in opposition, not particularly vigorous opposition, but again, my concern on this is that we not give the opposition in the court battle anything upon which they might seize upon in order to compel us into something that our delegates do not want, which is a pure digital convention. So I rise in opposition to this and request the body vote against it.
Thank you. Mr. Bryant, you have a point of order.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So my understanding, the rules of debate is alternating yeses and nos, correct?
No, that's not correct. I was questioned on whether I had called that and whether it met the threshold. And so we have suspended the application of that rule until that vote can be retaken.
So, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. And Mr. Rain, point of information. Mr. Rain.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I did not realize I had my hand raised.
Understood. Yeah, if you could pull that back off, I'd appreciate it. Ms. Sisk, you have a point of information.
Yes, sir. Okay. Just to clarify, this
Excuse
is
me.
only
Again, excuse me. Sorry,
I'm
Ms.
sorry.
Sisk. Again,
Carlos,
folks, if you could mute yourself while you're not the one speaking, it will reduce annoying background noises. Please do that. Thank you.
Okay,
Now-
Mr. Chairman, Carla Sisk, SD21. So I'm just trying to clarify, if this is just a contingency plan, then would we have to meet again to vote to enact it? And if we don't enact it, they can still meet in person? Or would the Supreme Court decision saying no, would that automatically trigger this?
No, this rule, as you can see here in the proposed, all it does is expand the entities that are allowed to have an online convention so that even the temporary committees for the state convention can have an online convention. Can.
So it
May.
means they can, not that they have to.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right. I see 2 more points of information. So, Ms. Wilson. Let's make sure.
Mr. Chairman, the way I am reading this is there is nothing in this that prevents the committee chairman from deciding to hold it in person, but allow committee members to also participate virtually. So how I'm reading it, you could do a combination. It gives a chairman flexibility to do both. Is that correct or not?
I do not believe so. And actually, I'm going to ask the parliamentarian to address that question.
So there is no such thing as both. The moment you allow, the moment you allow somebody who is not present in the meeting to participate by voting, you have an electronic meeting, period. So it is either an in-person meeting or electronic. There's no 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Thank you.
You bet. Let's see, if each one of you would remove your point of information indicator when you are done, that would be great. Ms. Wilson, if you'd do that, thank you. Mr. West, you have a point of information.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. It's nice being able to speak again. So if Mr. Howell presented it correctly, then we have either a virtual or an in-person, but we cannot do an in-between. Is that correct or is that incorrect, Mr. Howell?
Well, again, questions get addressed to the chair.
Mr. Chair, I apologize. Again,
and the question, your question is there a such thing as an in-between? No, it is an electronic meeting. Some of the people happen to be hanging out together while they're in an electronic meeting, but it is an electronic meeting.
Okay, so they may do that at different parts of the state if they so choose within the confines of their home.
There is no one who will check to see where they are and who they're with when they're joining electronically.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the ability to speak.
Thank you for removing your point of information request since you've already addressed it. Thank you. Okay, now I see some hands raised. Let's see if those are, well, actually, no, you know what, those go in order, and we've had some people patiently waiting to debate, to speak in favor or against. Ms. Wall, are you available? There we go. Sorry. There we go.
Yes, I don't have anything to say. I think I just pushed the wrong button.
Understood. No problem. Let's see. Ms. Thomas, you wish to speak against?
Yes, I speak against. I think that in the virtual, just as we're seeing here, the chairman has extraordinary powers. He can mute. He can do the, there's no way to, he can go so fast that we can't see what's going on. It's new technology. No, none of us are used to it, so we can't react very quickly. If we're in person, we all know how the in-person ones go. It's like even in person, it's very hard to keep track of things because things are going so fast. Information's flying. It's almost like horse trading. You're picking up on visual cues. You're able to get people's messages from people that have come in and want to address the committee, and it's kind of an organic experience. And I don't see that this virtual meeting will suffice the types of meetings that we're used to and that the delegates are used to, and the transparency that they deserve. So I speak against.
Thank you. That brings us to Ms. Wise.
Thank you, Chairman. I just had a couple of more things I wanted to add. I wanted to remind everyone that the temporary committee meetings are made up of 31 members that were appointed along with the chair and a secretary. And so it's half of what this body is. And I'd also like to mention that in the credentials committee, so far this week, we are down 4 people. So that is over 10% of the state delegation is not going to have representation on our committee, on the credentials committee, if I only have the option to meet in person. Now, next week, we may have more people who are unable to attend. So then we may be up to 15%, 20% of the state delegation that will not be represented on the credentials committee. And that concerns me. We'll still have a quorum, but I think it's very, very important, especially when there is an alternative available here that we can all vote for and use if necessary. If we have a significant number of folks who aren't able to join us in person, but can join us online, all of those 4 delegates are able to join online right now. They just can't meet in person. One of them, for example, is having to serve on the ballot board because his ballot board judge has COVID. So he has to go and replace him. So he has to be down in his district. Just as an example, he's fine. He can be there on Wednesday, but or he can meet online on Wednesday, but he can't get to our meeting in time on Wednesday if he was going to have to drive and be there in person. So I've got other cases like that. So I would really encourage everyone to give us the flexibility to be able to be able to adapt as needed, given these extraordinary circumstances. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Scott, you had a point of order. Ms. Scott? If you could unmute yourself, please. Ms. Scott, you'll have the floor. Okay. Ms. Starnes, you have a point of information?
So I have 2 points of information, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much, Dion Starnes, SD30. I just want to make sure that because of what's happened, we do not fall under the governor's 10-person rule, and wanted to make sure that the rooms that we had, I know we had the big meeting room starting on Wednesday. Do we have them starting on Monday as well?
Kyle has assured me that we have the rooms necessary to do these meetings with appropriate social distancing, starting at 9 a.m. on Monday.
Okay, thank you.
And we are essential, so the 10-person rule doesn't apply to us.
Got it. Thank you.
You bet. Ms. Hedke, you have a point of information.
Yes, I understand Ms. Wise's concern about representation, but are we under a quorum for our committees to operate and get the business of the party done? Does each committee have a quorum, or can 3 people show up and be the committee and get stuff done?
The quorum for convention is a majority of those registered. I believe on committee, the quorum is a majority of the committee. Thank you. Ms. Scott, again, if you could unmute yourself, you'll have the floor for your point of order. Okay, then that brings us, Ms. Starnes, do you have another point of information or just bring that down?
No, sir, I'm just technologically challenged. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, I think you accidentally double clicked it, I think is the situation. So now let's go to Mr. Dunham.
Sir, my motion will be for later on.
Understood. Thank you. Okay. Let's go to Mr. Ramsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. As one of the three affected committee chairs, I must very respectfully disagree with the other two affected committee chairs, or I should say four, sorry. I deeply would appreciate the flexibility. I think it would have been awesome had we done this a month ago or 2 months ago or before. We have one member who is recovering from COVID at home as we speak, and he deeply wants to participate. But he also understands that that may not be possible depending on what happens. He certainly cannot attend in person because he's still under quarantine. My committee, which I've been in not frequent enough, but frequent contact with, when I told them the latest plan was that we were going forward pending the Supreme Court of Texas decision, were almost universally ecstatic over the idea that we were going to go ahead and move the meeting to the Marriott if needed. The one gentleman that was the only one that was actually concerned about, when are we going to make this decision, is he's getting on the road in the morning to drive to Houston, and he's got an 11-hour drive to get here. But even he was in favor of moving it to the Marriott in person. I think that's a really good data point that the committee members affected are pretty much, at least on my committee, okay with coming to Houston under these circumstances, knowing full well that the court could potentially shut us down Monday night, Tuesday, whenever that could happen. On the court side, and again, I would love the flexibility had we done this months ago. The court is inherently political. We have members that have ours by their name in the elections. That's absolutely undeniable. I find it stunning that we find ourselves in the position of being worried whether or not that court is going to side with us, having been shut down, in my view, unconstitutionally by a Democrat mayor without due process. To me, it's everything else, COVID related, anything else Mayor Turner has said is absolute, pure, unmitigated pretext. He is trying to shut us down, as the attorneys have said in our lawsuit. I mean, these are solid issues, but back to the fact that several have mentioned here already that in a political world that you and I live in, we look to clues on how people are voting. We look to body language. We look to subtle things that people are signaling. Even though I would love the flexibility, I would absolutely love the flexibility. I would cherish Paul being able to participate from home, convalescing from COVID. That's part of showing how you can open up Texas safely and responsibly, in my view. Given that there is even the possibility that Mr. Norrid explained that this could be spun to give our all Republican court a way out to either not rule on it or to rule against us, I am absolutely compelled to vote no on this. So thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to Ms. Glover.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jill Glover, SD 12. I just wanted to agree with my colleague, Mr. Ramsey, excuse me, Mr. Ramsey, as well as Mrs. Thomas. I think our online format has absolutely demonstrated the difficulty of having committee meetings electronically. I know my delegates are absolutely severely concerned about our ability to do any convention business electronically, to be perfectly frank. And so I am voting no against having any temporary committee meetings online electronically. I agree that it is far too restrictive and confusing of a format. And especially when it comes to committees like platform, we need the in-person ability to interact. Those are far too important issues to be left up to electronic means of communication, which is just severely insufficient and ineffective. Thank you.
Ms. Robertson.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tanya Robertson, SD11. Speaking in opposition of this rule change, we've talked about committee members not being able to travel to Houston or backing out. What about the delegates that are going to travel or have already traveled to Houston for that matter? We're disenfranchising them if we go virtual, because they want what Mr. Ramsey said earlier. They want that in-person interaction. They want to be able to communicate their position to us clearly and in person. Also, we've had a couple of friendly neighborhood counties and one city, Pasadena and Harris County, that has offered facilities if the Marriott should change their mind. So just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Scott, try again. You've got a point of information. Ms. Scott?
No, that was just that was a mistype or something. I apologize. I obviously don't know how to use Zoom like half of the body, so I do apologize.
No worries at all. Thanks.
I'm so sorry.
No, quite all right. Ms. Knowlton, you have a point of information.
Yes. Well, we speak in opposition to this rule change as well. I have talked to my.
Okay,
Can you hear me?
So you did not have a point of information you're speaking against?
Yes. Sorry, did I press the wrong button? I'm sorry.
That's right. Go ahead.
I've spoken extensively to the delegates coming from SB 19, and in addition to the confusion or the things that Mr. Ramsey spoke to and that Mr. Nord addressed, the virtual option for many in rural counties is just not an option. And many counties don't have bandwidth availability. They will still be traveling long distances, even if they could find a place. Courthouses that might be an option are run by our opposition party. They will not make them available. So for all of these reasons that are so cumbersome, I will be voting in opposition to this rule change. Thank you.
Thank you. That takes us to Mr. Munn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thomas Munn, SD 24, serving as proxy for my county chairman tonight. Could not be with us. Thank you for giving me the opportunity of this adjustment. It is disenfranchising to a lot of us for various reasons that we cannot attend because of the current situation. Electronically gives me the opportunity to address you here tonight, just as it would give me the opportunity to address the committees, the convention. This technology is not that extreme. It's the 21st century. The majority of Americans use this type of stuff on a regular basis. The Democrat Party of Texas did their entire thing with this sort of technology. We are not backwards compared to them. We are not primitive compared to them. We should be able to do everything in any format that we wish. Of course, the ideal thing is to meet in person, have everyone there. These are not ideal times. These are not the element that we get to deal with today. The element that we're getting to deal with today is, can we enfranchise as many people in the state as possible? This adjustment gives the committee chairs that opportunity. If 90% of the people travel to Houston and do the activities in person, while 10% participate virtually, yes, that's an electronic meeting, but it gets 100% participation then, not 90% or 50%. It gets the largest amount of people involved and with the opportunity to be heard and to be represented. I hope that this will give everyone a few moments to pause and think, do I want to cut out some people in favor of a majority, or do I want to include all that I can? That's the real option here, is to include all that we can. So I hope that you will vote in favor of this item. I will be. Mr. Barcroft has indicated to me he wanted to support this measure. So I will be voting in favor of this measure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. That brings us to Mr. DeRazio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As it stands right now, at first I was in favor of electronic, but as I hear the debate, I am strongly opposed to the electronic from a platform committee point of view. I have 9 different subcommittees. Each one of those subcommittees have a specific documentation that we gave to them that they have to debate within their subcommittee. I have 6 different secretaries. Each secretary will be with those subcommittees, and they download the information, and then they bring it to the main secretary, who downloads it and then locks it down so they can't be tampered with. We need to be, for us as a platform committee to do this virtually would almost literally be impossible. We need to be together to do this, or else we're not going to be able to complete the work effectively. I started working on this platform committee just almost about 3 days after you had assigned me to this committee. So I have 31 people. So we said, okay, we'll try it. We set it up, and we had a meeting for all the committee members to meet each other. And as I was going through and trying to run this thing with Zoom and do the work that we needed to do, it was a disaster. Not that it's not a good system, but for us at that point in time, it was very difficult. We couldn't make it work that fast. And right now we have 31 people that we would have to train to be able to do it. And the same thing happens to them that happens to you. But the chairman is very good at handling these Zoom meetings because you have a lot of practice. We don't have the practice. And even though our committee meeting was only an hour, it was extremely frustrating to me because I need to read those people and what they're saying, what their body language is, where they are on issues. I need to be able to walk over to a subcommittee and say, hey, here is this, and here's some information for you there. And we, even though we have everything organized and it's ready to go, I think that the work that we would put out for the people that we represent would be it would not be in their best interest. But we have to let the people be heard, and we have to do this work. And that's why I'm opposed to this.
Thank you, sir. That brings me to Mr. Graham.
I haven't raised my hand or anything.
Okay, my apologies. Then that brings us to Mr. Bryant.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
I can.
Sam Bryant, SD22. I speak strongly against this this amendment. 100% of all the emails that I've received in regards to an in-person convention have all been in favor of an in-person convention versus an electronic of any kind. Everyone in the Senate district has strongly opposed any form of electronic meeting. Now, my understanding is it was clarified by Chris Howell that that we can have either or. You can't have both. You either, so even if Mr. Thomas's statement was correct, that 90% show up in person down in Houston and 10% show up, you're willing to trade off 90% to cater to the 10%. So far, my understanding, he's the only individual that's claimed that he's recovering from some sort of illness. But my point is, if he's the only person that's, him and a few others, why should we trade off? Because we can't have both. Why should we trade off 90% to cater for 10%? Because you can't have both. 100%, all stress that they do not want any form of electronic convention, period. I yield back.
Mr. Nord, you had a point of information?
Mr. Chairman, I have my hand raised. I thought that was an interrupting motion signal.
Okay.
Is that not what it?
That's all right. Go ahead.
I'd like to know if I can call the question.
Mr. Nord already had a point of information. That's got priority, I believe. Hang on a sec.
And I want to speak in
waiting.
favor of it, Mr. Chairman.
I've had my hand up for a while.
I want to speak in favor.
So do I.
In favor of calling the question? So the motion on the floor right now is not an interrupting question. Calling the question is not an interrupting question.
No, I don't want to speak in
information.
favor of that. I want to speak in favor of the motion to amend Rule 14C. That's what I want to speak in favor
Right,
of.
okay. Then I'll put you on the list of people to speak in favor. As
Thank
I
you.
said, I was recognizing Mr. Nord for an interrupting motion for a point of information. Mr. Nord.
Mr. Chair, I rise on a point of information. I just want to confirm this. Under our standard rules, if, for example, we have a delegate who would like to testify to the committee and the committee wanted to hear that or have anybody who was previously for some reason couldn't attend, the chairman of that committee can take remote testimony, right? We're just talking about voting. So all this really changes is that the chair will allow voting by remote means. This doesn't have any impact really on whether they take testimony because they can do that anyway. Is that right?
That is correct. The committee, actually, to be specific, the committee can permit, not the chair but specifically, but the committee could.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I appreciate it.
Mr. Kessig, you also had a point of information?
Yes, let me try this one. My understanding is the point of the convention is that it is an in-person convention. That is the way we operate. And that's my understanding. So disenfranchisement isn't really an issue. The issue is that this body meets statewide in one place.
Sorry, do you have a question? A point of information is if you have a question for the chair.
Well, the only question I have is, since this is really different from all the things that we've discussed so far, why wasn't this raised weeks ago? That if this is separate and apart from the big thing about the voting and all the caucus votes and stuff, why didn't we take this up weeks ago? It's really like a separate piece.
Mr. Kessig, that is debate. Please be respectful of your other members. And if you would like to debate, by all means, participate in the debate. Mr. McCloskey, you had a point of information, which I hope is a question for the chair.
I asked a question.
But
I said, why wasn't this brought up before?
Mr. Kessig, that is not a question for the chair. That is a rhetorical question for debate. Mr. McCloskey, you, I hope, have a point of information, which is a question for the chair.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Mike McCloskey, Senate District 5. I think I'm clear on this, but apparently there's some confusion. I'm going to the text of the motion itself that says that a meeting of the temporary committee may be conducted, not must, through electronic meeting services chosen by the temporary committee chairman. And that also means that we would trust the 5 committee chairmen in making that decision. Am I correct in that assessment?
You are correct. This rule change makes it a may. I believe I said that a few minutes ago.
Apparently some folks weren't clear.
Again, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. McCloskey, Mr. Kessig, if you could please remove your indicators for point of information. Mr. Ramsey, you have a point of information for the chair?
Point of inquiry, yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
So if we were to vote this rule down, would it be within the ability of the committees themselves, for example, my committee on legislative priorities, to have some standing rules to, or on a case-by-case basis, allow committee members and the public to participate remotely without this rule, so long as the committee agreed to that?
The exception to what you asked is that a remote member could not vote or otherwise make motions, but otherwise, yes, what you said.
Correct. But provided they, for example, wanted to participate in the discussion, but were willing to not vote and make motions, then that would actually work okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got a Mr. Cruz, point of information.
I pulled it back down, Mr. Chair. Mr. Nora had my exact same question. Thank you.
Great. Mr. Ramsey, if you'd remove your indicator. And see, Mr. Nora, do you have a fresh point of inquiry or? Mr. Nord?
Sorry, that was my bad. I'll take it off.
No worries. Thank you. Mr. Bryan, do you have a fresh point of inquiry?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. My question is, if we didn't vote, if we voted this down, and that still gives the chairman of the or those working committees the ability to allow people to participate and engage in debate, they just couldn't vote or make it, they couldn't vote. However, putting this rule in place, does that give all the virtual remote members the ability to vote? And secondly, does it cancel out every vote in person? Because if you have an electronic meeting, you can't have both, as it was clarified earlier. So I'm asking for a clarification. What is the result of voting this down versus putting this rule in place?
So voting in favor of this motion allows the committees to allow electronic participation, including voting and motions. Voting against it prevents that. If you could remove your indicator, please, Mr. Bryant. And seeing no further points of information or otherwise, we are on to Pastor Broden. You have the floor, Pastor Broden.
Excuse me, Chairman Dickey, I had a point of information, SD 29, Barbara Carrasco.
I'm sorry, I had already called on Pastor Broden. Let's let him
just
have it.
Verifying you can see my hand up there.
Your indicator was not up when I called him. It is now. Yes. Pastor Broden, you have the floor.
I'd like to call a question.
Okay, that is in order. We have is there a second for calling the question?
Second.
Okay.
Andy Dunning, SD 16.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion to call the question. It does take 2/3 vote. Let's go ahead and use the yes, no indicators to go for that 2/3 vote. So yes is a vote in favor of calling the question. No is opposed calling the question.
Mr. Chairman, a point of information, please.
Yes, sir.
Mark Dunham, SD 29. So I don't lose my hand being raised. And I can't sit there and seem to chat to everyone. I can only chat to yourself and the members of the staff. How would I indicate my vote?
You could chat it to me.
All right.
Like.
Mr. Chairman, I have a point of parliamentary procedure. I had my hand raised to speak in favor of this motion, and somebody else made a prior motion to call the question. You told them that you would take that after I had an opportunity to speak, and I was denied the opportunity to speak. At this point, I'd like to ask how many people have spoken against this motion, and yet people who have spoken in favor of it, because I'd like to speak in favor of it, Mr. Chairman.
I didn't keep count, but I'm aware of at least 5 who spoke both for and against.
I don't believe that's correct, Mr. Chairman, but I would like the opportunity to speak in favor of it. And you did tell me I would have that opportunity, and now you've taken a motion to call the question.
I did. Unfortunately, this motion does end debate, and it does pass overwhelmingly 35 to 9. So my apologies, Mr. Rain. I will endeavor not to make such a mistake again. Now Mr. Covey has, so debate has ended. You've called the question. 2/3 voted in favor of calling the question. Quite more than 2/3 voted for calling the question. And so now we are voting on the motion, whether to make this change, which makes it possible for the temporary committees that begin on Monday to allow remote participation, allow an electronic meeting if they choose. So this is going to be a roll call vote. And Mr. Flynn, if you would please call the roll.
Sue Evenwell.
No.
Robert Kessick.
No.
Jerry Fisher.
No. No.
Jason Ross.
No.
Judy Parada.
Yes.
David Covey.
Yes.
Allison Winter, proxy Daniel Ure.
No.
Walter West.
That would be a no.
Nita Davidson.
Yes.
Mike McCloskey.
Yes.
Don McDonald.
No.
Chris McDonald.
No.
Mark Ramsey.
No.
Terry Leo Wilson.
No.
Susan Fisher.
Yes.
Chuck Branch.
No.
Ann Gebhardt.
Yes.
Steve Atwell.
Yes.
Susan Wright.
Yes.
Warren Norred.
No.
Tanya Robertson, sorry.
Scott Hapley, proxy for Tanya Robertson. No.
Okay. JT Edwards.
Yes.
Jill Glover.
No.
David Halverson.
No.
Don Elliott.
No.
Roy Morales.
No.
Jen Duncan.
Okay, you done me? Yes. Sorry.
Fernando Trevino.
Yes.
Gail Stannard.
No.
Virgil Cruz.
No.
Susan Fountain,
No.
Randall Dunning,
No.
Kathleen Wall,
No.
Marvin Cleed,
Yes.
Edie Sinclair,
No.
David Luther,
No.
Marion Knowlton,
No.
5 to 12.
Robert Cassius,
No.
Hannah Scott,
No.
Samuel Dalton,
Yes.
Carla Sisk,
No.
Terry Harper,
No.
Ashley Sellers, proxy Amy Hedke,
No.
Trip Bryant,
No.
Leslie Thomas,
No.
Pastor Stephen Broden,
No.
Summer Wise,
Yes.
Jack Barcroft, proxy Thomas Munn,
Yes.
Linda Kinney,
Yes.
Mark DeRazio,
No.
Marion Stanko,
Yes.
Michael Rain,
Emphatically yes.
Morgan Graham,
Yes.
James Evaletta,
Yes.
Neva Hanning,
She votes yes, but she doesn't have her sound.
thank you. Drew Bullard,
Yes.
Barbara Carrasco,
Yes.
Mark Dunham,
No.
Dion Starnes,
No.
Britton Brooks,
No.
Rhonda Lacey,
No.
Tom Roller.
No.
The vote is 23 for, 39 against. The motion fails.
Motion fails. Okay, we are now on the next agenda item. And Mr. McCloskey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike McCloskey, Senate District 5, since we are on the next agenda item, which deals with the possible rescinding or relocating of the convention, I have a motion. I move that the Republican Party of Texas convention be held as follows. On Thursday, July 16th, an in-person Senate District caucus meeting will be held within each Senate district. On Friday, July 17th, an in-person Congressional District caucus meeting will be held within each congressional district. And on Saturday, July 18th, the general session and state convention meeting will be held virtually.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. Unfortunately, the motion to do multiple locations in person is out of order because per the rule change that you all passed on Sunday in RPT Rule 33, the general counsel would have to declare that there is no reasonably viable legal remedy, and he has made no such determination. So that motion is out of order. Mr. Dunning, you are up. Mr. Covey, you are up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David Covey, SD3, would like to make a motion on revisiting convention location. I sent my motion to Mr. Brandon to put up. The motion would be in recognition of the exigent circumstances. I move the SREC reaffirm our decision for an in-person convention to be located in Houston and only be moved to online if the Supreme Court rules against the RPT or by 7 p.m. Monday, July 13th, whichever comes first. In other words, we go in person and we fight this.
Second. JTA was at 11. Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Mr. Moore, do you have that wording up on the page? Yes, there we go. In recognition of the exigent circumstances, I move the SREC reaffirm our decision for an in-person convention to be located in Houston and only be moved to online if Supreme Court of Texas rules against RPT or by 7 p.m. Monday, July 13th, whichever comes first. So let's see, Ms. Headkey. Well, actually, Mr. Covey, as the maker of the motion, would you like to speak in favor?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. We took a vote a little over a week ago and passed by overwhelming majority that the delegates and SREC want to have this in person. And I have heard nothing but the same things. It's time that we fight this all the way to the end and continue on with an in-person meeting if absolutely possible. And so at some point we have to go on. The committees can do what they need to do. And if they're going to be in person, I think we need to move this forward. That's what our delegates want, and it disenfranchises the least amount of delegates. Thank you.
Great. Let's see, Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members, and good evening, everybody. I rise in support of this particular motion by Committeeman / Chairman Covey. One of the things I do know is, we went back from the last meeting, what our City District and what they want. They want an in-person convention. We want an in-person convention, Mr. Chairman and members. We have, of our superstar team, one of my state reps and a very good friend who is fighting for us from Beaumont to El Paso, from Amarillo to Brownsville, to ensure that this convention takes place in Houston. And I could not be more proud, along with my colleague Warren Norred and a few others led by our general counsel. I believe they're going to succeed. But as we talked about in our last meeting, members, and this is important, should we not prevail, which I don't think so, I think we're going to have an in-person convention. Should we not prevail, we have a viable backup plan to conduct the business of the convention as necessary. And I'm going to urge the body to support me in voting for this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members. Thank you.
Thank you. So I've got about 10 people in order. I'm going to take you in the order that I have you. Mr. Halverson.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I wholeheartedly endorse this this motion, and am of the opinion that we have made a vote 2-1 to bring this convention as an in-person convention, as little as we want to be in Houston after all, but we're determined to have our convention as it has been planned to do. And so we need to stand together, I believe. Let's stand together as the Republican Party of Texas against all of our odds, against all of those who would try to oppose us, and to bring this convention to the city of Houston to do our business and to go home and elect Republicans in November. So I encourage everybody to vote for this motion. Thank you.
Okay, I've got a point of order and point of inquiry. Mr. Branch, you have a point of order.
Yeah, actually, I apologize. It was supposed to be a point of inquiry. And my question was, I've had many people ask about what's our deadline for the RNC to get our delegates, get a list of our delegates.
It is July 20th. And I spoke with the chairwoman personally, day before yesterday, and it is our deadline.
Okay, no chance of waiver for that?
No, and Dr. Armstrong can affirm, he and I spoke about it as well. And it is clear. We have already extended far past the normal extensions, and we're it. The deadline's coming up, July 20th.
Thank you.
Yes, and I affirm that.
Thanks, sir. So let's see, Mr. Morales, you had a point of inquiry?
Roy Morales, SD 13.
point of information here, Mr. Chairman. The way this is written, if we get information by 7 p.m. Monday, that does assume that the temporary committees are already meeting at the Marriott.
Correct.
Thank you.
Let's see, so that takes care of the points of information and points of inquiry. Actually, it looks like I may have another point of information. Let me find that. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you. Mr. Chris McDonald, SD6. When are the next hearings set? My information is that hearings are set for 7/13 and 7/14.
So there are multiple courts. There are.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you.
Sorry. Again, if y'all would please mute yourself when you're not addressing the body. There are multiple courts. I am aware of a hearing scheduled for Monday. I am not aware yet of the hearing scheduled for the Supreme Court. Let's see. Okay, so then that brings us to Ms. Headkey.
Thank you. I would like to move to amend this. I absolutely want to reaffirm our decision for an in-person convention to be located in Houston, and I would like for Plan B to be moving it to Montgomery County and before we resort to an online convention.
Noted.
And Mr. Chair.
And I'm sorry. So hang on just a sec. A couple of things going on here. So to answer Mr. McDonald's question, there actually isn't a hearing for the Supreme Court. We're waiting for their ruling. It's all by submission. Let's check one quick thing. So Ms. Headkey, your amendment was what again?
That I would like for our Plan B to not be moving directly to an online convention, but to move our in-person convention to Montgomery County.
I second.
Okay.
I concur, Mr. Chairman, if I may speak on that.
The mover of a motion gets dibs on speaking, and other people addressing speaking are taken in the order that they have indicated, in the order they are at the mic. So Ms. Headkey, you have the floor if you would like to speak in favor of your amendment.
I would, thank you very much. We do have a workable proposal for Montgomery County use at Lone Star Expo Center. It has the room. It won't be as cushy as what we're used to, but it can work. It can get the business of the convention done. And I'd like to echo my SD22 delegate, Paul Hodson, who was diagnosed with COVID, was on the Legislative Priorities Committee, and he is still very unselfishly advocating for the fact that we need an in-person convention to do the work of the party. And this is one of those things where every single person who was elected and appointed to these committees they took this position during a pandemic, knowing that we were moving forward with an in-person convention. We need to exhaust our in-person opportunities before we resort to an online convention, which will automatically disenfranchise our delegates.
Well, and this seems like a good segue. I've seen a lot of people express some questions about whether, in fact, the party had considered other in-person alternatives without objection. Kyle, would you please address a question about other physical locations?
Sure. And someone had mentioned last time that they wanted to see me in person on these things. So I'm assuming that was my mom. I want to give her the opportunity to see what I look like. Let's see here. There we go. Okay. So I have done a lot of due diligence over the last couple of days to reach out to some jurisdictions that have asked us about having our convention at their facilities. We started out talking to the Montgomery County Judge's Office about the Lone Star. There's an outdoor Lone Star Pavilion and a civic center that exists in Montgomery County. So what we talked to them about was they have a rodeo facility, a livestock facility, arena that has approximately about 3,000 seats in an outdoor facility. They talked about having some chairs placed around that facility, and it's a dirt floor arena, but they could come in there with a steamroller and flatten out the dirt, try to make it as hard as possible, and include some chairs out there on that. The most immediate concern about that is it is outdoors. There's no air conditioning in that facility. There's not even any fans in that facility. So right now, the temperature, I think, in the forecast for the city of Houston and the surrounding areas is somewhere in the high 90s next week. So there was an immediate concern about having basically an outdoor general meeting in weather that was high 90 degrees with over 50 to 60% humidity, and what kind of danger that would put our delegates in to be out there for a prolonged period of time. Also, there are no facilities at that area for our committee meetings. So we would have to actually either build or truck in some facilities out there. Each one of those tents or structures would cost tens of thousands of dollars to build. And we would need dozens of those to facilitate the SD and the county conventions in that area. And, right now with our cancellation, the fee itself to cancel, because we did have obligations to our AV and our decorator, we'll be lucky right now to break even just by paying the penalties and the bills we owe because the city of Houston did what they did to us by canceling on us. So there's no convention funds sitting around right now that we could tap into to pay for either hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in rental and construction facilities, construction costs for currently an outdoor convention. So I had some discussions with the convention center that there is in the Woodlands, and I spent considerable time over the last couple of days seeing how we would possibly lay out our convention in the existing facilities they have there. Best I can tell, just the congressional districts alone, and Rena and Dion can back me up. I mean, this is not something that's usually done in 48 hours. I did the best I could to try to give you guys the answers you needed, as there were a lot of questions about moving to Montgomery County. Best I can tell, just laying the congressional districts out in the convention center facility they have in Montgomery County would orphan at least 9 congressional districts with no place to go. So we would need to actually do it. We would have to have caucuses somewhere, we'd have some of them inside of that facility. We would have to bus people somewhere else to other hotels or other places out there. Again, none of this is free. And I was basing this off of about 1/3 of the capacity that we were originally planning for, assuming that there would be, a lot less people coming to convention than there were originally. The space plan that Rena and Dion and I and others on the committee of arrangements were working off of, we're assuming 9,000 delegates to the convention in Houston. I had attempted to fit in the congressional districts into the space that was available in Montgomery County at 30%, at 3,000 delegates showing up. And even with that, I could only fit in. I could fit in the congressional district caucuses, with the exception of 9 caucuses that would need to be held somewhere off-site from either the Marriott that is there in the Woodlands or the Westin, which is also next to it. These would have to be some other hotels that would need to be bused to in and around Conroe. So, you know, I could honestly, and that's assuming 3,000 delegates. If there were 4,000, right now we have 4,800 people registered for convention. So if all of those people showed up, there would be no way to shoehorn that all in there. Somebody used the analogy of trying to fit a size 14 foot into a size 8 shoe. You know, that is what this would look like, unless, again, we were busing people around all over the area to different hotels and different facilities around there. So the Lone Star area, as best I could find, would require many hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, depending on how many structures we would need to build out on their fairgrounds. And it would require us to have our general meetings in an outdoor livestock pavilion with no air conditioning or fans. The option to do it over in the convention center in Montgomery County, if we did 50% capacity, the largest space they have would only allow for about 2,000 or 2,500 people to be seated at the same time. So even if there were, what I was talking about, 3,000 people, many hundreds of people would not be allowed in the same room as the general meeting would be taking place. They would have to be sort of scattered around in different areas. Now, that doesn't mean that they couldn't walk into the other room to make motions or be recognized, that sort of thing. There was the issue that was raised about how they would vote for voice votes, because if the chair was only in one room and caucuses or CDs were seated in different areas, how would you hear their voice votes? You know, there's a lot of complications to this. That convention center idea was about $150,000 at least. And again, there's no convention money left. So that would be $150,000 of RPT money that would be spent to hold this. The option to do it outdoors would be, best estimate, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, to construct something outside in the next couple of days. And so, you know, if anybody has any other ideas about Montgomery County, I've spent many hours over the last a couple of days trying to figure out how we would do a convention in Montgomery County. And those are the issues that I've bumped up against.
Kyle, point of information, Mr. Chairman.
I will recognize you next. I have already, we had a point of information up earlier. That was Ms. Wilson. Ms. Wilson, you have a point of inquiry?
Yes, Mr. Dickey, this might be something that you direct Kyle, since he investigated this, but I would like to know if Kyle considered safety concerns, like with 3,000 seats and 6,000 plus delegates, how will we socially distance? How would that logistically work out? We previously voted on a motion to not require masks of people. So I don't know if he's looked at the safety portions of that. Will there be enough facilities to frequently hand wash? You know, I'm just concerned about the safety and the number of seats that he mentioned.
Okay, well, so I will turn it over to Kyle here in a second, but I can tell you that was one of the really offensive things about the response of the city of Houston in our lawsuit. They claimed they had good intentions of trying to keep people safe by kicking us all out in the street. But their lawyers said, you can go on up to a place where you have a quarter as much space and you are much, much, much tighter compacted. We're totally fine with that, as long as we get to tell you you can't exercise your political rights within our city limits. Kyle, did you have anything else to add about the security, the safety considerations for Montgomery County?
So the 25, yes, sir, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but the 2,500 or so I mentioned, that would be at 50% capacity. The largest ballroom I think could fit 5,600 people in it if you had no social distancing whatsoever. So if you just put everybody in there, it would be like 5,600 people. But I was looking at the 50% capacity because that's what we were doing in Houston was 50%. So I was applying that same, that same reasoning to this location, and that's how we arrived at that. And that's how I arrived at the attempted space planning of that room too. Is what I did. I basically said, all right, we were looking at 9,000. What if we had 3,000? So I divided all the space that we were hoping to do before by 1/3, and then I doubled it basically to say, okay, 1/3 of the people coming, but twice the amount of distance. And where could we put all of these caucuses with those numbers? So, I had tried to account for 50% of district distance, but again, that was only with 3,000 attendees, not with 4,800 or any more than that.
So do we have any fire marshal concerns with, if we have a limit of how many people we can fit in there, 5,000, 6,000, and 9,000 delegates show up, then we're going to be turning delegates away?
I don't want to be dramatic, but if 9,000 delegates showed up, I have absolutely no idea how you would fit that in there. I don't know. I mean, that would be 3 times the amount of people that I was trying my best to shoehorn in there. I have no idea how you would do it.
What are the fire?
Sorry, Ms. Wilson. Yeah, that's we've used up the point of inquiry for you. We have 2 points of order and 9 more points of inquiry. Well, I will take them in order. Mr. Branch, you have a point of order.
No, sir, I apologize. I didn't take my hand down. I will correct that.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, we have Ms. Hedge. You have a point of order.
I do, because this is completely off. The entire fairgrounds includes 33 acres of space in addition to 56,000 square foot facilities, 111,000 square foot facilities, and an 82,000 square foot facility. Just in the 33 acres alone, you can social distance 76,000 people. We've already run the numbers on this. Nobody will get turned away, and every single member in this discussion today has already received a proposition of how we can bring in air conditioning and everything else.
Sorry,
and I have zero.
That's debate, not a. That's debate, not a. Ma'am, that's debate. Ma'am, that is debate, not a point of order.
Get the fundraising to cover this.
That is debate, not a point of order. Thank you.
Well,
okay, so now let's go to points of information. We've got a couple other points of order. Sorry, ma'am. Again, that was debate, not a point of order. So, Mr. Munn, you have a point of inquiry.
Is that a point of order?
Sorry, you broke up. I couldn't understand what you said. Mr. Munn, you have a point of inquiry.
Yes, sir. My point of inquiry is to you. The expense, if we spend a large sum shifting to a different location, there is no more convention money, I understand. So that would come from party funding. And would that then limit what we could spend on campaign activities and other things to prevent a blue wave from reaching our state?
Well, it would no question make it would take away funds that we currently intend to spend on campaign activities. Yes. Back to, let's see, Mr. McCloskey has a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike McCloskey, Senate District 5. Just so I understand, I believe that this motion is not in order when the executive director of the RPT is saying he's not prepared to bring a contract to the officials committee for consideration.
Your point is not well taken. Let's go on to the next point of order. That would be Ms. Hedke. Do you have a point of order?
No, I did not.
Sorry.
Again,
Okay,
I
your
apologize.
indicator was still on. No worries. Let's see. I believe I'm still showing 1 point of order. Oh, that's you, Ms. Headkey. If you would pull that down. We have 7 points of inquiry. Ms. Sisk, what is your question?
Mr. Chairman, Carla Sisk, SD21. I would like to make an amendment to the amendment.
Okay, that's not a question. You
Okay,
indicated
how do we
a
get
question.
recognized? How do we get recognized for that, sir?
You can put your hand up. So,
Okay, I've had my hand up for the last 30 minutes.
no, you had a point of inquiry indicator, not a hand up.
But
We've
I
got,
went
ma'am,
from one to
we
the
have,
other to get
ma'am,
recognized.
we have 30 people in order to be recognized.
Okay,
You
yes, sir.
changed your indicator, so now you have to skip the line, but now you're back at the back. Don't do that.
Okay, so I'll put the yes back on, sir, and I would like to make an amendment at the time. The hand, yes. Yes, sir. Oh, the hand,
Great.
yes, sir. Thank you.
You bet. Mr. DeRazio, you have a question. Mr. DeRazio, yes.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I just need a point of inquiry. If the Supreme Court rules against the RPT and we as the platform committee are in session on Monday when they come to order, does this mean we have to go virtual?
It's not germane to the question.
Yeah, actually, I don't believe it is. I don't believe that you would have to, and I don't believe it's germane to the question. Mr. Rain.
Mr. Chairman, Michael Rain, SD26. I rise for a point of inquiry that I think is very pertinent to this motion to amend to move the convention to Montgomery County. And I think it's best answered by our legal staff. What I'd like to inquire is what is our obligation under our current contract with the City of Houston and the George R. Brown Convention Center, or under our under the terms of our lawsuit? What is our obligation to mitigate damages by seeking another venue that will allow us to have a live convention?
As of right now, the George R. Brown Center, Houston First Corporation, as the manager of the George R. Brown Center, they have broken their contract with us. We have contractual remedies and we are suing for damages.
Well, I understand that, Mr. Chairman,
sorry.
but my question is,
So your question was, what obligations do we have under a contract they broke? Well, they broke.
No. That's
so
not my question. You're misstating my question and misunderstanding it. And
Okay.
I'm sorry. My
Please
question
repeat.
is, it's a very, very particular legal question. What is our obligation to mitigate our losses, our damages under either the contract or the lawsuit by seeking other locations?
Oh.
And I think, and that's why I think it's best answered by the legal staff. What's our obligation to mitigate damages?
With all due respect, we always have a responsibility to mitigate damages, and that is not that actually is a business decision, not a legal decision of which way we go. It is up to this body to determine which way we go to mitigate those damages. But yes, a court will, of course, take into account what steps we do and don't take. Of course they will. That's not a legal question. That's a business question.
So
given that we've got a broken contract, there is not a specific additional one. And but if you have other legal questions, you're welcome to send those to me, and I will run them by counsel. Let's see. So we have 8 more points of inquiry. Let's see, Mr. West, your point of inquiry.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kyle Watley, this is Walter West, SD4. Mr. Kyle Watley wasn't able to speak with me earlier, and I apologize for that, Kyle and Dion. But we also have the ability to secure the Cynthia Woods Mitchell Pavilion. I have spoken with them earlier today, as well as the Lone Star Convention Center. We also have those
Sir,
abilities.
excuse me, that does not sound like a question. What's your question? You indicated you had a point of inquiry. What's your question?
My question would be, would we be able to reconvene this whenever the proper people on the committee could actually communicate better?
That is not relevant to this debate. Ms. Wilson, you have a point of inquiry.
I'm sorry. I forgot to take it down.
Okay. Mr. West, yours can come down. Mr. Covey, you have a point of inquiry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David Covey, SD3. It sounds like we've looked at the Montgomery option. Another option that has been suggested is Galveston. Or were you able to look at a Galveston option, or is the staff able to speak to that?
Yeah. Kyle has been looking at that. Kyle, do you have some comments about the Galveston action?
I can't. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I almost had one of those moments. My daughter walked in here and I was afraid she was going to start like breakdancing behind me. So I started muting everything feverishly. But yes, I was looking into the Moody Gardens. There's a convention center. There's a hotel resort there. They are larger than the Montgomery County Convention Center. So, there is a little bit more meeting space. There are 6 still orphaned congressional district caucuses that I wasn't able to find space for. But perhaps something could be done about that. But again, and I was using the same numbers that I was using in Montgomery County, or 1/3 of the amount of people. These would be if 3,000 delegates came. Could we shoehorn them into the Moody Gardens? And again, I was a little bit more successful than I was in Montgomery County because there's a little bit more space available up there. They had the same issue with with their largest exhibit hall space and how many people you could fit in there. So, you would only be able to have it at 50% capacity. You'd only be able to have about, 2,700 people in that room. Everybody else would have to be watching somewhere else, or, the other caucuses or SDs would have to be somewhere else. And we'd have to somehow figure out those issues of how those people, would be able to do the yays and nays by voice vote. I wasn't able to secure an exact cost of how much that would cost. I would still put that somewhere in the probably a couple $100,000 range, just based on my experience about how much that kind of space costs when you rent it. Above and beyond what we have available to us in convention in remaining convention funds. But again, at 1/3 capacity, I was able to place all but about 6 of the congressional districts. And those were in a lot of shared spaces. That was another difference a little bit between the Montgomery County option and then the Galveston option, was that a lot of these spaces would have to be divided with some sort of curtain or other divider to allow multiple meetings to be taking place in the same space. Because they had certain spaces that were open to 500 people that you could put 200+ person caucuses into, but we wouldn't be able to put a brick wall between them. There would be obvious audio bleeds going on between the 2 events that we would just have to sort of deal with. But yeah, and again, these are all just bare bones caucuses in the general session. There's no gala banquets. There's no exhibit spaces in either one of these. I did my best to just try to find places for the actual caucuses to meet and for the general session to take place. So to summarize, in a lot of ways, they were very similar, the Moody Gardens and Montgomery County, except that there was just a little bit more space at the Moody Gardens to have the meetings in. They had some more space available, but there would be a lot of caucuses meeting right next to each other in shared spaces.
Thank you. We have 6 more points of inquiry. Mr. Branch.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to bring up, there was information that was that other people talked about. I just want to clarify that Mr. Watley's information about The event center is 111,000 square feet and 5,000 seats. And it looks like the Mitchell Pavilion is closed and they will not be allowing anymore. They've canceled their previously scheduled events. So just want to bring that up.
But point on that.
That's actually not a point of inquiry, please. Point of inquiries are questions for the chair. Again, somebody's got their phone not muted who's not addressing the body. If you would please mute your phone. Mr. Rain, you have another point of inquiry?
No.
Okay, sorry. That brings me to Ms. Glover.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to, Jill Glover, SD12, I just wanted to make sure that I'm very, very clear on this amendment, that it is basically saying if the Texas Supreme Court does not rule by Monday night at 7 p.m., then we will go to a virtual convention. Is that correct?
That does appear to be the intent of the word.
That actually, that needs to be clarified. The wording, if Ms. Headkey's amendment was adopted, it's a little bit clear, but if it failed and we're back to just online, it is not clear if that triggers or not. It would be better if there's better grammar there. If that was
Thank you. So, Mr. Edwards, point of inquiry?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, and I appreciate the recognition. Mr. Chairman, the question is for you or for any of our national committee people. Mr. Chairman, it's a two-part question, Jermaine. Can you educate myself and the body on the RNC ramifications of relocation? I'm somewhat familiar with the rules, but if you can clarify the rules regarding relocation of the convention for me at your leisure, sir.
So the RNC issued a lot of waivers for all sorts of states as we all dealt with consequences of coronavirus and responses to it. And one of the waivers that they did put in place was an automatic waiver for folks to, if a state had to move their convention to online. I spoke today with the Minneapolis state chair who had to do that, talked about that with her. There is no other such blanket. We did receive approval for our waiver request to move the date of our convention. We did not request a location change because the convention center and Houston First all said there was no problem. But as long as we get, the most important thing is that we get our delegates reported on time. So the July 20th date is our most important thing. Mr. Morales.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Roy Morales, SD 13. This question is probably for Kyle. When you looked at the temporary buildings, did you make sure the right size for the right delegation? Did you check the AC requirements, the electrical requirements that would be needed, as well as the costs associated with that and getting these up in so many hours?
Yeah, I mean, that level of detail would require a full RFP, which we haven't had time to issue. I will admit that some of this is sort of back of the napkin math over the last 24 hours or so that we've been given to, or 48 hours to been given to sort of look into this. So the email that I saw going around earlier, for instance, said that a 600 person tent with air conditioning would cost $75,000. We would need probably 30 or so tents, because there are some facilities out at that Lone Star area. There's a exhibit space that has some room that you could probably put maybe 4 or 5 caucuses into, depending on the size of them. They have an outdoor pavilion that's rather large. That it's not air conditioned, but it does have a fan, apparently a large fan located in it. And then they have a meeting space that's out there that could probably fit another 2 large to moderate sized caucuses. So that would maybe dispose of 8 or something. So you'd be looking at close to 30, maybe, let's just say 25 of various sizes. So, I mean, if there were 30 of them at the size it would take for a 600 person tent, you're looking at $2.25 million to build that many of that size. Now, again, like you pointed out, they don't all need to be 600 people, but that just sort of puts in perspective the cost. I mean, even if it was 500,000, there's not any, unless there's a massive influx of registrations, there's not a lot of convention money in there to mess around with. Certainly not $500,000, certainly not $1 million, and definitely not 2.25 million. So, whatever it ends up being to build all those structures out there, I mean, that's a lot of money.
But again, this is just an estimate and not an indel. Doesn't even sound like a rough order to the magnitude in this scope. It's just a good guess.
That's the best guess I can give you right now.
Thank you.
Yes. And again, to be clear, it was the clear instruction of this body just a week ago that we move forward with an in-person convention in Houston. So we have been taking every step towards that. I still see 6 more point of inquiries. 3 of them at least are people who've already had point of inquiries answered. So if you could please remove those indicators if you have already asked your question. Mr. Morales, Ms. Glover, Mr. Edwards, Ms. Headkey. Is that a new question or still from the past? Okay.
Unmuted now.
Yes. You
Okay,
are.
right. Point of inquiry.
Sure.
Since we're talking about back of the napkin math and discussion right now, would it be in order for us to amend this to have Plan B, it be a working group to actually get a better look at what those facilities can do, and include both facilities and any others that may come to RPT's attention in the next 24 hours? So could that amendment be made now?
Yeah, that's not actually. So when and if you're recognized to make an amendment, then certainly I'm unaware of any reason. I'm unaware of any reason that that wouldn't be entirely appropriate. So let me start taking people in the order that they've indicated. Mr. Bryant.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'd like to make an amendment to the amendment.
Okay.
After Montgomery County, it would say, and or meet in our respected SDs and CDs to conclude our business if no other location is available in the event that and that's it.
Second.
Okay, that amendment is still just as out of order as it was, as the motion was a few minutes ago. So now on to Mr. Ross.
Can I appeal the ruling of the chair, please?
Appeal the ruling, appeal the ruling.
Appeal the ruling.
Sure. So there is a motion to appeal the ruling.
Second.
There is a second. You all voted for a rule on Sunday that says that would be out of order unless the council has determined, and you all specifically added this wording, unless the council determines that there are no viable legal options. So have you all decided that if you all have decided that that's a thing you want to change, that is a rule change to the rule change you just made on Sunday. Rule changes require 2/3 and therefore this attempt to skirt the rule change you just passed with a 2/3 majority on Sunday is entirely out of order. And you also haven't given the notice requirement either necessary to change that rule that you just made.
Chairman, appeal the ruling?
Yes, you are welcome now to speak to your appeal.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, Jill Glover, SD 12. Sunday night, I think many of us were very confused about the wording, and we did not realize what we were voting for. We did not realize that that we could not amend it to meet in our SDs and CDs, that we had completely eliminated that possibility. And so I do ask that Mr. Bryant's amendment be allowed, as so many of us did not understand that that's what we were doing, and that was not what we were, many of us were intending to do.
Okay, the motion before you is to sustain the ruling of the chair. If you agree with the chair's ruling, vote aye. If you disagree, vote nay. Mr. Flynn, would you please take the vote?
Sue Evenwell.
No.
Robert Kessick.
No.
Gary Fisher.
Yes.
Jason Ross.
Aye.
Judy Parada.
Aye.
David Covey.
Aye.
Allison Winter. Proxy Daniel Earl.
Nay. No.
Walter West.
Walter West, SD4, that would be a no.
Nita Davidson.
Aye.
Mike McCluskey.
Aye.
Don McDonald.
No.
Chris McDonald.
Yes.
Say again.
Aye. Yes.
Mark Ramsey.
Clarification. Aye is a vote to support the chair.
An aye is to sustain the rule.
Aye.
Terry Wilson.
Yes.
Susan Fisher. Chuck Branch.
Aye.
Ann Gebhardt.
Aye.
Steve Atwell.
Yes.
Susan Wright. I didn't get you, Susan.
Susan Wright, yes.
Warren Norred.
Yes.
Tanya Robertson, proxy.
Yes.
JT Edwards.
Aye.
Jill Glover.
No.
David Halverson.
Aye.
Don Elliott.
Aye.
Roy Morales.
Aye.
Jan Duncan.
Aye.
Fernando Trevino.
Yes.
Gail Stannard.
Aye.
Virgil Cruz.
Yes.
Susan Fountain,
No.
Randall Dunning,
Aye.
Kathleen Wall,
Aye.
Marvin Cleed,
Aye.
Edie Sinclair,
Aye.
David Luther,
Aye.
Marion Knowlton,
Aye.
Robert Cassius,
Yes.
Hannah Scott,
Aye.
Samuel Dalton,
Aye.
Carla Sisk,
Nay.
Terry Harper,
Aye.
Ashley Sellers, proxy, Amy Hedke,
Aye.
Trip Bryant,
I get a clarification. An aye vote is that you agree with the chair's ruling, and nay is,
That you disagree with the chair's ruling.
what's a nay?
Leslie Thomas,
No.
Pastor Stephen Broden,
Nay.
Summer Wise,
Aye.
Jack Barcroft,
Yes.
Linda Kenny,
No.
Mark DeRazio,
Aye.
Marion Stenko,
Nay.
Michael Rain,
No.
Morgan Graham,
Aye.
James Zavaleta,
Aye.
Neva Henning,
Yes.
Drew Bullard,
Yes.
Barbara Carrasco,
Yes.
Mark Dunham,
No.
Dion Starnes,
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. No.
Britton Brooks,
No.
Rhonda Lacey,
No, by proxy, Tom Roller.
Tom Roller.
No.
Mr.
We have to
Secretary.
vote,
Susan Fisher is a yes.
Susan
Mr.
Fisher.
Secretary Mike McCloskey changes his vote to no.
Without objection, we'll take that change, even though the voting had ended.
And
This is Nita Davidson, SD5. I changed my vote to a no and sent Josh a message a few minutes ago.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Flynn, what's the vote count?
I've got 41 ayes, 21 nays.
Okay, the ayes have it. The ruling of the chair is upheld. We will continue with debate on the amendment. The debate is to add the words Montgomery County to the proposal submitted by Mr. Covey, to the motion made by Mr. Covey. Mr. Branch, you have a point of information?
No, I don't.
Sorry, okay. Noted, taken down. Let's see, we have, I believe I see two others. So there's someone in the meeting who's listed as Daniel. The chair is unaware who that would be and which member that would be.
I'm Daniel Ure on behalf of Allison Winter, proxy. I have a point of inquiry.
Yeah, if you could make sure that reflect on your name, proxy 4 and then SC4, or sorry, the proper ST.
I'll try and figure out how to do that.
There you go. Yes, perfect. There you go.
My question for the chair was, is there something in the rules that would prevent in these smaller venues given that everyone wants to meet personally, is there something in the rules that would prevent a staggering of the meetings of the SD and CD caucuses?
No, but that's not germane to this motion. So the motion is to add the words Montgomery County. And we have several to speak on for and against, and we have 3 more points of inquiry. So let's get to those. Let's see, Mr. Branch, still need to pull yours down. Let's see what else we have in there. Okay, let's get to the folks in order of speaking for and against. Let's see here. We have Mrs. Davidson. Mrs. Davidson, you indicated you wanted to speak against?
No, my hand is not up.
Yeah, you've got the X indicator of speaking against. Mr. Ramsey. Okay, Mr. Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually was going to make an amendment to the proposed amended motion, and that is to strike the if SCODEX rules against RPT and replace it.
That's out of scope of this amendment. That would be an appropriate amendment as soon as we get out of this.
Okay, thank you.
Right now, the amendment is to add the words Montgomery County. So any amendments to the amendment can only deal with those 2 words.
Back, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ramsey.
Yes, I've spent a good chunk of the last day and a half investigating this Montgomery County option, and there's a lot of enthusiasm for doing that. But as Kyle has also spent a lot of time investigating this independently of what I did, there is simply not enough room. It's not practical. We don't have enough time. It would cost too much. I would love it. It's right in my back door, but it is just not practical. We've spent 3 hours now, and we've only gotten to this point. I would strongly suggest that we stop this nonsense, that we vote this down. And I'm not going to do it yet, but I think we should call the question all the way back.
Okay, Mr. Dunham, you have a point of inquiry?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We've been talking a lot about the finances and stuff for the particular Montgomery County option and other options. The one thing that I fail to know is, and have ever heard, is the financials if we're going to go virtual.
Thank you.
Okay, again, that's not germane to the amendment on the floor, which is Montgomery County. So unless it has something to do with those 2 words, it's not germane at this moment. Please stick to the debate. Let's see, Ms. And again, if you are not addressing the body, if you do not have the microphone, please mute yourself out of consideration for your fellow members. Ms. Sisk, you have your hand raised?
Yes, sir. Hold on. Let me get back on here, please. And I will. Okay, thank you. Carlos Sisk, SD 21. However, I wanted to make an amendment to the motion, but I think at this point, you said if it's not just about Montgomery County, then it's not germane. So I'm not sure if this is going to be in order yet, Mr. Chairman, but I'd like to say it all before you cut me off. May I have that respect, please?
No, because out of respect to your fellow members, that we have one topic at a time, so that so that we can keep things clear. So the topic right now is the amendment Montgomery County. Please.
Okay, then may I speak against it? May I speak against it?
Yes.
Okay, I would like to speak against this motion. I would like to agree with Mr. Ramsey. Guys, can we move on? It's getting late. We're getting tired. We're not going to Montgomery County. I don't think this is a real option. Can we please move on? May I call the question?
No, because we haven't been able to have any debate because we've had so
Okay.
many point of inquiry so
I
far.
just urge my fellow committee people to let's get this done and move on so we can bring
Okay.
up their business, please.
Actually,
sir.
my apologies, ma'am. You did have the floor. You did call the question. So now we will vote on whether to call the question if there is a second.
Second.
Chairman?
Second, JT Edwards, SD 11.
Okay, so it's a non-debatable motion. It requires 2/3. Let's see. We'll have to do a roll call vote. So because it requires 2/3. So, Mr. Flynn, would you please take the roll call on whether to call the question on the amendment to add Montgomery County to the motion?
Sue Evenwell,
Yes.
Robert Kessig,
Yes.
Jerry Fisher,
Yes.
Jason
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Judy Parada,
Yes.
David Covey,
Yes.
Allison Winter,
Yes.
Walter West,
Walter West, SD4, that would be a yes.
Nita Davidson,
Yes.
Mike McCloskey,
Yes.
Don McDonald,
Yes.
Chris McDonald,
Yes.
Mark Ramsey,
Yes.
Terry Wilson,
Yes.
Susan Fisher,
Yes.
Chuck Branch,
Yes.
Ann Gephardt,
Yes.
Steve Atwell,
Yes.
Susan Wright,
Yes.
Warren Norred,
Yes.
Tanya Robertson,
Yes.
JT Edwards,
Yes.
Joe Glover,
Yes.
David Halverson,
Yes.
Don Elliott,
Yes.
Roy Morales,
Yes.
Jan Duncan,
Yes.
Fernando Trevino,
Yes.
Gail Stannard,
Yes.
Virgil Cruz,
Yes.
Susan Fountain,
Yes.
Randall Dunning,
Yes.
Kathleen Wall,
Yes.
Marvin Cleave,
Yes.
Edie Sinclair,
Yes.
David Luther,
Yes.
Marion Knowlton,
Yes.
Robert Casillas,
Yes.
Hannah Scott,
Yes.
Samuel Dalton,
Yes.
Carla Sisk,
Yes, sir.
Gary Harper,
Yes.
Ashley Sellers,
No.
Trip Bryant,
No.
Leslie Thomas,
Yes.
Pastor Stephen Broden, Summer Wise,
Yes.
Jack Barcroft,
Yes.
Linda Kinney,
Yes.
Mark Durazio,
Yes.
Marion Stanko,
Yes.
Michael Rain,
No.
Morgan Graham.
No.
Say that again.
Nay.
James Zavaleta,
Abstain.
Neva Henning,
Yes, please.
Drew Bullard,
Yes.
Barbara Crosco,
Yes.
Mark Dunham,
Yes.
Dion Starnes,
Yes, sir.
Britton Brooks,
Yes.
Rhonda Lacey,
Yes by proxy.
Tom Roller,
Yes.
That's, you got your 2/3.
Mr. Chairman, Walter West, SD4. I'd like.
Sorry, Ms. West, we got about 8 people ahead of you that have already had their hands raised. I will
Right.
get you in proper order. Mr. McDonald, you're up next.
Mocha or bust.
Oh, wait, sorry. Debate has ended. We are now voting on the amendment. So we are voting on the amendment for Montgomery County. So now, Mr. Flynn, if you will please take the vote on the amendment to add the words Montgomery County to the to the motion as proposed by Mr. Covey. Again, we're adding the words Montgomery County. So
This being an amendment, is it possible that we just do a voice vote?
Sure. Let's wait a sec here. Let's have everybody unmute themselves. I'll just wait till I see everybody unmuted. Go ahead and unmute yourself, everybody, because this.
You're gonna ask for a voice vote?
A voice vote on an amendment, right? So since it's just the amendment, we'll see if we can't speed it up a lot by doing a voice vote. So Mr. Ross, Ms. Sisk, Mr. McDonald, if you, there you go, Mr. McDonald's unmuted. All right, so everybody's unmuted. All in favor of the amendment adding the words Montgomery County, say aye.
Aye. No.
All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Okay, let's instead do the checks yes or no, since this is the vote on the amendment. We're going to clear the tables and now the votes on the amendments. Click yes if you are in favor of the amendment. Click no if you're opposed to the amendment. Go ahead and click now. Okay, so we are. Okay, the voting is going to close in
Mr. Chair, that's going to make my hand go down. I'd like to keep my hand up and vote no.
Okay, yeah, you could send me a check to that effect. That'd be great. Okay, so we have vote is closing in 3, 2, 1. On the checks, it is 9 yes and 44 no. And we have a couple of each in the chat. So the motion fails. So that then brings us back to the motion prior to amendment. So now, Mr. Covey, you're first up. So now if everybody could remute yourself. Everybody could remute yourself if you're not addressing the body. Mr. Covey, you are up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David Covey, SD3. I noticed that the letters down here on the screen show that the motion is unclear. And so I'm wondering if I can make it more clear by making a motion to amend to the only to be shall be moved. I think that makes it more clear. And I'm open to parliamentarian input.
Yeah, no, that does make it more clear, certainly.
That
So
was-
the motion,
Second.
sorry, Mr. Howe.
Yes, that was the concern. By saying only be moved did not necessarily indicate that it would actually.
Yeah. So, okay, so the amendment has been made and seconded. Mr. Covey, if you'd like to speak to your amendment.
Mr. Chair, it's, I don't have anything new to add to that, just that it is very important that we get in.
Understood. Okay, so we have a motion to amend, adding the word or replacing the word only with the word shall. Any debate on that motion? Let's see. I'm going to take folks in order.
Mr. Chairman, Mark Dunham, SD 29.
Sorry, Mr. Dunham, you're not. You're
inquiring
for the. Yeah, no, I'm going to the point of order first. Mr. McDonald, you have a point of order?
Yes, sir. Chris McDonald, SD6, rising to bring point of order. This entire amendment, as it's written, is out of order as it's contrary to the rules of the Republican Party of Texas, and the previous agenda item failed, and we have no rule that would permit an online meeting of a state delegation. This must be withdrawn.
Second.
I agree. So the new rule, the amendment out of order. Point of order is well taken.
So we just wasted how much time?
I move to call the question on the main motion.
Second.
Stand at ease for a moment. There is no main motion because the point of order invalidated the motion. So,
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion, please.
well, I appreciate that, ma'am, that there are at least 4 people in front of you. Let's go with Mrs. Thomas. You have a motion?
I was going to amend this, but it doesn't exist anymore.
Correct. Okay, great. Then Ms. Sisk is the next one up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Carla Sisk, SG 21. And of course, I just took a bite. Excuse me 1 second. Okay. Mr. Chairman, I rise to move that we change the location of the convention caucuses, not the whole convention, the caucuses, to be held in 31 regional SD caucuses and 36 CD caucuses, respectively, on Thursday and Friday, so that we may gather in person to conduct business and vote. These locations will become officially recognized and published by the RPT. I further move that the general session would be gavelled in at the date, time, and place, or as close thereto as practical, as noticed in the original call, with the attendees to join virtually via Zoom. And then there's a second part, if I may please finish. Finally, I move that the delegates present at the regional caucuses meetings be considered present for the purpose of quorum for the convention. Committees would be allowed to meet and vote virtually, provided all delegates would have the ability to observe the proceedings, to give testimonies online as provided. Well, you know what, the last part I think we put out, but so moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Okay. I believe that is still out of order, but if you will send me the language, and if everybody will stand at ease for a moment, I'll take a look at it and let you know.
Yes, sir. I will
if you would email that to me, that'd be great.
Email it to you directly, sir. Yes, sir. I will do that this very moment.
Thank you. And if everybody will stand at ease and keep yourself muted, I would appreciate that. And we will take a quick look at the wording.
Okay, it is sent.
Thank you, ma'am. If everybody will remain at ease and again, remain muted, we'll take a look at what's sent.
And thank you for the consideration, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely. Okay, ma'am, thank you very much for sending that over. It is out of order, but for a different reason. This violates the Texas Election Code by conducting business before the convention is organized. See section 174.095 convention business. After
Think
the
it'd be amended.
convention, after the convention is organized, the convention shall conduct its business. So the convention's only allowed to conduct its business after it is organized, and your motion was to have it try and do business before it was organized. So therefore,
No,
it's
sir, that
out of
wasn't,
order.
that
So
wasn't my intention. That wasn't my intention. May we amend it to fix
then
that
well,
problem?
you're welcome to consider making a different motion. But as of now, I'll be moving on.
Okay,
to
can you
Mr. Applicant.
please explain? I'm sorry, sir. Can you please explain which part? Because I'm saying that you gavel in the
Chairman.
general
Ma'am,
and then
ma'am,
it's just a
I've given you,
caucus.
ma'am, I gave
Mr.
you.
Chairman, point of order.
Yes.
Decorum, strict enforcement, please. Thank you, sir.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand, please, sir, which part is wrong.
I said.
Mr. Chairman,
your
point of order.
motion-
Decorum,
Yes,
please, strict enforcement. Thank you, sir.
I appreciate that. I was clear. Your motion suggests the convention do business before it starts. That is against the law. So please reevaluate your motion and feel free to consider preparing a different motion. In the meantime, Mr. Ross, you have the floor.
Thank you. Okay.
I'm sorry, I had my hand up for the prior amendment that I wanted to make, but that motion's now gone.
Understood. Mr. McDonald, you have the floor.
Yes, sir. As we've accomplished our agenda entirely as listed to include revisiting it to visit 14C, at this time I move adjournment.
I second the SD4 West.
Okay, so we have a
I
motion
second as well.
and a second to adjourn. Don't need a third, Mr. Rain. We have a motion and a second.
Mr. Chairman, I've had a point of information for some time now. I was asked to sit there and wait to bring it back up. And I would really like to sit there and bring up my point of information before we decide that we're going to close things down. Thank you.
There is a motion on the floor.
Oh, man. So am I to understand, Mr. Chairman, that again, I will not be recognized and I'm going to get shut down? Is that correct?
Well,
Marked
you
on
said you got a point of
information that I
Right.
requested
Excuse me.
sometime through.
Yeah, if you would, please let me finish my sentence. You said you have a point of information, which is a question. By all means, please ask your point of information. I'll be happy to see about getting it answered for you.
Thank you. My point of information again goes to what is the financial requirements for doing an online convention?
Oh, again, as I said then, it was not germane at the time. It's still not germane. But please keep things to the now. That is a question you're welcome to answer offline, but it's not one of the topics we are discussing at the moment. And actually, at the moment, we are voting on the motion to adjourn. So let's use the hands, the yes and no signals on the motion to adjourn. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, check yes. All opposed to the motion to adjourn, check no.
And it is a 2/3 vote, right, Mr. Chairman?
I believe that is correct, but please continue voting. All in favor say yes, all opposed say no. And it's actually, it's only a majority. All in favor say yes, all opposed say no. And the motion carries. We are adjourned. Have a great
We haven't
evening.
decided anything.
That's good, Carla.
Actually, we
That's
did.
out.
We decided to continue to move forward with our in-person convention in Houston. It was a very clear decision.
Yes, sir, but we don't have a contingency plan